What if the land everyone called cursed was never about the rocks or the ruins? What if it was actually the burial ground of a revolutionary fortune that generals tried to erase from history? The sky was the color of old bruises on the afternoon they buried Antonio. Purple clouds hung low over the small cemetery at the edge of town, pressing down on the mourners like a heavy blanket soaked in rain. The air tasted of iron and salt, the way it does before a storm breaks loose and changes everything. Maria stood at the edge of the open grave, her body trembling not from cold, but from a grief so deep it felt like drowning on dry land. She was 28 years old, but in the 3 days since Antonio had died, she felt like she had aged a century. Every breath was a struggle. Every heartbeat was a reminder that his had stopped. The wooden coffin descended slowly into the earth. The ropes creaked. The sound of dirt hitting the lid would come soon, that terrible finality that signals the end of everything. Maria clutched a single white rose in her hands, her knuckles bone white from the pressure. Her son Josu stood beside her, only 6 years old, wearing a black suit that was already too small in the sleeves. He held on to his mother like she was the only solid thing left in a world that was falling apart. His father had been his hero. Now that hero was being lowered into darkness, and the boy did not understand why heroes had to die. The priest finished his prayer. The words floated away on the wind, meaningless and cold. People began to leave, eager to escape the rain that was starting to fall in fat, cold drops. But Maria did not move. She stepped closer to the grave, lifting the rose to throw it down onto the coffin as a final goodbye. That was when the hand grabbed her wrist. The grip was strong, the fingers like iron wrapped in black leather. Pain shot up her arm, but the physical hurt was nothing compared to the shock of who was holding her. Dona Elvira, her mother-in-law, stood beside her. The older woman was 65 but stood straight as a statue carved from marble. Her black dress was expensive, tailored, perfect. Her eyes were dry. She did not look like a mother who had just lost her son. She looked like a general who had just won a war. Her face was a mask of cold fury, and when she spoke, her voice was low and sharp as broken glass. "Do not dare," Elvira hissed. "Do not dirty my son's grave with your cheap sentiment. You do not need to pretend anymore, girl. It is over." Maria tried to pull her hand away, but Elvira held tight. The rose fell from her fingers and landed in the mud. "What are you talking about, Dona Elvira?" Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "He was my husband. I loved him." Elvira laughed. It was a short, cruel sound that had no warmth in it. "You loved his name," she said. "You loved the roof over your head and the food you did not have to work for. But listen to me, Maria. The show is over. Antonio is underground, and with him goes your protection." Josue, frightened by the sharp tone of his grandmother, stepped forward. His small voice shook as he spoke. "Grandmother, please. My mother is sad." Elvira looked down at the boy. There was no tenderness in her eyes. She looked at her own grandson the way someone looks at a pest that has crawled into the house uninvited. "And you," she said with contempt, "you are the living proof of my son's mistake. Mixed blood. You have no place in my house, child." Something broke inside Maria in that moment. She yanked her hand free from Elvira's grip and pulled Josue behind her, shielding him with her body. "Insult me if you want, Elvira," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "Throw all your poison at me. But do not dare look at your grandson that way. He is all that is left of Antonio." Elvira smiled. It was a smile that promised trouble. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out something metal and old. She held it out toward Maria. "What is left," she said, "are the properties, the lands, the wealth that belongs to the Garchica family by right. And you are not a Garza, you never really were. Take this." Maria looked at the object in Elvira's gloved hand. It was a key. A large, old key made of iron, completely rusted and ugly. It did not look like the shining golden keys to the grand house where Maria and Antonio had lived for the past 5 years. Maria took the key with trembling fingers. The metal was cold and stained her skin with red rust. "What is this?" she asked, feeling a terrible emptiness in her stomach. "It is your new home," Elvira said, lifting her chin with arrogance. "Because you are not coming back to the mansion." The world seemed to stop. The sound of the rain became a dull buzzing in Mara's ears. "Not coming back? But Dona Elvira, all our things are there. Josiah's clothes, my memories, his toys. Antonio wanted. Antonio is dead," Elvira shouted, losing her composure for just a second. "And I am the owner of everything again. My lawyers have reviewed the papers. The house is in my name. The car is in my name. You have what you brought when you arrived. Nothing. Well, I am wrong. You have this key." Elvira stepped closer, invading Maria's personal space, forcing her to step back until she almost fell into the open grave. "That key opens the lock to the ruins on the hillside. Do you remember that piece of worthless land to the north of town?" Antonio, in his stupid romantic gesture, put that parcel in your name years ago as an anniversary gift. "Well, there you have it. It is yours. Go there." The ruins. Mara felt the air leave her lungs. "Dona Elvira, for the love of God, that is a pile of stones. No one has lived there in 100 years. It has no roof, no water. I have a 6-year-old son. He is your grandson. Then you better teach him to survive like the peasant you are," Elvira spat. "Because my employees already took your old rags out of the mansion, and I do not want to see you near my door. If you set one foot on my property, I will call the sheriff and say you are trespassing. Disappear, Maria, you and your bastard." Without another word, the old woman turned and walked away. Her driver waited with the engine running and the heat on in a black luxury car. Elvira climbed in without looking back, leaving the widow and the orphan standing in the rain beside the fresh grave of the man who had loved them. The limousine disappeared around the curve of the cypress-lined road, splashing mud as it went. Silence returned to the cemetery, broken only by Maria's sobs and the steady sound of rain. Before we follow Maria and Josue into the wilderness, before we discover what secret waits in those broken walls, take a moment. If stories of injustice turned into triumph call to you, if you believe that the darkest nights come just before dawn, then like this video. Subscribe if you want more tales that sleep between history and justice. And leave a comment. Tell me where you are listening from right now. Tell me if you have ever felt abandoned by those who should have protected you. I want to know that this story is traveling across the world, whispered into the night, wherever you may be. Now, let us return to the hill where Maria's life will change forever. Mama. Josue tugged at her sleeve. He was shivering. His lips were starting to turn blue from the cold. "Are we going home now? I am hungry, and I want to take off these shoes. They hurt." Maria looked at her son and felt her heart shatter into even smaller pieces. If that was possible, how could she explain to a 6-year-old boy that they no longer had a home? How could she tell him that his grandmother had thrown them away like garbage? She knelt in front of him, ignoring the fact that her knees sank into the mud, staining her black stockings. She took his cold little hands in hers and blew warm breath over them. "Listen to me, my love," Mara said, forcing a smile that cost her everything. "We are going on an adventure." "An adventure?" Josue asked, confused. "Yes, Papa left us a special place, a secret place just for us. We are not going back to the big house today." "Are we going camping? Camping in the rain?" the boy asked, skeptical. "Brave explorers are not afraid of the rain, son," Mara lied, feeling tears mix with raindrops on her cheeks. "We have to be strong. Papa is watching us from heaven, and he wants to see how strong we are." She stood with difficulty. They had no car. Antonio had been the one who drove. They had no money in their pockets. Maria had barely had time to dress for the funeral before the chaos began. The only thing she had was that rusted key in her hand and the clothes on her back. The ruins on the hillside were 5 kilometers away. 5 kilometers of dirt road, uphill, in a rocky area forgotten by God, where only thorns grew and where the wind howled like hungry wolves. They began to walk. The journey was a calvary. Each step was a fight against the mud that tried to trap their shoes. María had to carry Josué for much of the way because the child, exhausted from crying and the emotion of the day, could barely move his legs. She carried her son in her arms, his 40 pounds of weight adding to the weight of her own pain. But María did not complain. As she walked, her mind was a whirlwind of fears. How were they going to sleep? What were they going to eat? What would happen if Josué got sick? Anger warmed her body. How could there be so much evil in Elvira's heart? Antonio had been a good man, generous. How had he come from such a cruel woman? After 2 eternal hours of walking under rain that was beginning to ease and give way to a freezing wind, they arrived. María stopped short, gasping, and lowered Josué to the ground. "Is this it, Mama?" the boy asked. The view was desolate. The ruins was not a poetic name, it was a literal description. In front of them rose the skeletal remains of what centuries ago might have been a building. There were 4 thick walls of stone and adobe, uneven, eaten by time and covered with moss. There was no roof. The grey sky was the only cover over that structure. The ground inside the walls was covered with tall weeds, thorny grasses, and loose stones. In one corner, the remains of an old fireplace looked like the mouth of a stone monster. There was no door, only an empty hole where the wind entered, whistling. "But Mama," Josué's voice trembled on the edge of tears again. "There are no beds here. There is no roof. Everything is broken." María felt her legs fail. She fell to her knees on the wet grass. She wanted to scream, she wanted to curse. She wanted to run back to town and pound on the mansion doors until her fists bled. But she looked at Josué and saw the terror in his eyes. If she collapsed now, fear would consume her son. She took a deep breath, swallowing the knot of fire that threatened to choke her. She stood up, and pulling out a strength that only mothers have when their children are in danger, she pretended to be enthusiastic. "Look at those walls, Josué," she exclaimed with a false joy that hurt her throat. "They are castle walls. Look how strong the stones are. We are in an ancient fort." "It is wet," the boy complained. "Yes, but look, the rain has stopped. Let us clean a little corner." María entered the structure. The key Elvira had given her was useless, a cruel joke, because there was not even a door to open. She threw the key to the ground with contained rage and began to work with her own hands. Hands that had once caressed her husband's face on silk sheets now tore at weeds. The thorns ripped the skin on her fingers, but she did not stop. She gathered stones and cleared a corner protected by the 2 highest walls to cut the wind. "I will not let you defeat us, Elvira," she thought with each weed she pulled. "You threw us in the trash, but we are not trash." Night began to fall, and with it came the absolute darkness of the mountain. Far from the lights of town, the blackness was total. María knew the night would be the hardest test. Without fire, without blankets, hugging only to share body heat. "I am scared, Mama," Josué whispered, pressing against her side as they sat on a makeshift bed of branches and somewhat dry leaves that María had managed to find under some rocks. "I am here," she assured him, wrapping him in her arms and covering him with her jacket, leaving herself with only the thin blouse. "As long as Mama is here, nothing bad will happen to you. You are my brave soldier, remember." Josué nodded and closed his eyes. Overcome by extreme exhaustion, María stayed awake. She looked up at the rectangle of dark sky framed by the ruined walls. She saw a single star shine between the clouds that were dispersing. A lonely star, distant and cold. "Why, my God?" she whispered to the night, hot tears sliding down her cold cheeks. "Why have you abandoned us like this? I do not ask for riches. I only ask that my son does not suffer." A sound among the stones made her jump, a crunch. María groped for a heavy stick beside her. Her muscles tensed. It could be wild animals, snakes, or coyotes. She positioned herself on guard with the stick in hand and her body over her sleeping son. That first night in the ruins was not a night of rest. It was a vigil of terror and survival. Every gust of wind seemed like a ghost. Every shadow seemed like a monster. María, the dispossessed widow, the woman with a golden heart, felt for the first time in her life how hatred and determination hardened her soul. She did not know how or when, but she swore before those old, cold stones that Dona Elvira would regret leaving them there to die. What María did not know as she shivered with cold, embracing her son in the darkness, was that she was sitting literally on top of the answer to her prayers. But to discover it, she would first have to hit rock bottom. The darkness in the ruins on the hillside was not like the darkness of the city. In the city, or even in the Garcia mansion, night always had a grayish or orange tint from distant lights. But here, in this place forgotten by God, the blackness was absolute, heavy, almost liquid. It was like being inside a tomb with your eyes open. María remained sitting with her back against the rough, cold stone of the half-collapsed wall. She did not dare to sleep. In her arms, Josu breathed with an uneven rhythm, sometimes letting out small moans in his dreams, surely nightmares caused by the trauma of the day. María felt each of those moans like a lash on her soul. The cold of the early morning began to seep through her thin clothes. She had no blankets. The only thing separating Joshua from the freezing air was the linen jacket María had put over him and her own embrace. She, on the other hand, felt how the ice bit her shoulders, how her toes went numb. But the physical cold was nothing compared to the terror she felt when she heard the sounds of the environment. The wind whistled through the cracks in the ancient stones, creating a mournful sound, as if the ruins themselves were crying. Suddenly María tensed. Her hearing, sharpened by panic, picked up something different. It was not the wind, it was a scraping sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was moving among the loose stones, less than 2 meters from where her son's head lay. Maria's heart began to beat so hard she feared the noise would wake the boy. She gripped the stick she had picked up hours earlier. Her eyes tried to pierce the darkness, but it was useless. She could not see anything. The sound approached. God, protect him. She prayed silently with her teeth clenched to keep them from chattering. Then the clouds parted briefly, letting the light of a waning moon dimly illuminate the interior of the ruins. And she saw it. Only a few steps from Josua's leg, a black scorpion, large and menacing, was advancing with its stinger raised, seeking the warmth of their bodies. In this place full of cracks, scorpions were the true owners. Terror paralyzed María for a millisecond. If that animal stung Josu, weak and exhausted as he was, it could be fatal. They had no car, no phone, no hospital nearby. A sting meant death. Fear disappeared, replaced by a primitive, savage instinct. María was no longer the sweet widow. She was a lioness mother. With a quick, silent movement, she gently separated herself from Josue, rose to her knees, and lifted the stick with both hands. The scorpion sensed the vibration and turned toward her, ready to attack. Crack. María brought down the blow with all the fury she carried inside. She did not hit once. She hit twice, 3 times, 5 times, crushing the arachnid and the stone beneath it, until her arms ached and her breathing became a hoarse gasp. She stood there, panting in the gloom, looking at the dark stain on the ground. Tears welled up again, hot and salty. She was not crying for the scorpion. She was crying because she realized how low they had fallen. Only 24 hours ago, she was choosing flowers for her husband's funeral. Now she was killing vermin with a stick so her son could live one more day. Antonio, she whispered to the empty air. Antonio, look where we are. Why did you leave me alone? I do not know if I can do this. I am not as strong as you thought. But the wind only returned silence. The rest of the night, María did not let go of the stick. Every time she heard a creak, her muscles tensed. She imagined snakes slithering along the walls. She imagined wolves lurking in the undergrowth. She spent the hours awake, watching over her son's sleep like a guardian at the gates of hell, until finally the sky began to lighten with a pale, sad gray. Daylight revealed the true extent of their misery. If at night the ruins seemed terrifying, by day they seemed simply pathetic and dirty. The walls were covered with moss. The ground where they had slept was full of ants and dust. Mara looked at her hands. They were dirty, with broken nails and traces of dirt and dried blood from the effort of the previous night. Her black mourning dress was wrinkled and stained with mud. Josua stirred. The boy opened his eyes slowly, confused. For a second, Maria saw in his gaze the hope that it had all been a nightmare, that he would wake up in his soft bed with lavender-scented sheets. But when his eyes focused on the old stones and the open sky above their heads, reality hit him. His little face crumpled. "Mama," he said in a scratchy voice. "I am thirsty." Mara felt a stab in her stomach. It was not her own hunger. It was the physical pain of not being able to provide for her son. "Good morning, my love," she said, forcing a cheerful voice that sounded false. "Look, we survived the first night of our adventure. You are very brave." Josue sat up, rubbing his eyes with dirty fists. "My belly hurts. Mama, I want milk and bread with butter, like the ones grandmother Flora makes." The mention of food made Mara's stomach rumble. They had not eaten anything since lunch the day before the funeral. "Listen to me, Josua." Maria crouched in front of him and wiped a bit of dirt from his cheek. "Today we have an explorer mission. Explorers have to find their own food and water. That is part of the game." "I do not like this game," Josie said, and a single tear rolled down his dirty face. "I want to go home. I want my papa." Maria had to bite her lip so hard she tasted the metallic flavor of blood to keep from crying right there. She hugged her son tightly, allowing herself that second of hidden weakness. "I know, my life, I know. But now this is our home, and Papa is taking care of us from above. He wants to see if you can find water. Will you help me?" The mention of his father motivated the boy a little. He stood up, wobbling. During the next hours, Mara faced the titanic task of basic survival. She left Josua sitting on a safe rock and dedicated herself to exploring the perimeter of the ruins. The terrain was arid, full of thorny brambles that caught on her clothes and scratched her calves. There was no faucet, no pantry. She found a small stream that came down from the mountain about 300 meters from the ruins. The water looked clear, but Maria knew it could be contaminated. However, they had no choice. She had nothing to boil it with. She knelt, made a cup with her hands, and drank first. "If I get sick, it does not matter," she thought. She waited a few minutes. The water was freezing and soothed her dry throat. She brought Josua there. They drank like wild animals crouched on the shore. The water calmed their thirst, but awakened their hunger with more fury. For food, the situation was desperate. Maria, who had grown up in the countryside before marrying Antonio, knew some plants. She frantically searched through the undergrowth and found some wild dark purple berries and some edible roots. She knew they were not poisonous, but their taste was bitter and fibrous. She returned to Josue with a handful of these dirty berries and a couple of roots. "Look what I found," she said, offering the feast. "They are forest sweets." Josue tasted a berry and wrinkled his nose. "It tastes bad, Mama. Eat it, son. It will give you strength. It is magic medicine for explorers." The boy ate reluctantly, pushed by voracious hunger. Maria ate only what he left, which were barely the peels and the most bruised berries. Her stomach protested, but her mind was focused on another urgency, the roof. The previous night they had almost frozen. If it rained again, they would die of hypothermia. They needed shelter. Maria looked at the ruins. There was a corner where two walls formed a 90-degree angle that was still holding firm. If she could cover that triangle, they would have a small cave. She spent the rest of the day working like a beast of burden. She dragged large, heavy branches from nearby dead trees. Her widow's hands, which the day before had held a rosary, now blood dragging dead wood. She broke her nails. She splintered her skin. She lifted heavy stones to secure the branches over the walls. Her back screamed in pain. Her arms trembled from the lack of sugar and protein. But she did not stop. Every time she felt she was going to faint, she looked at Josue, who was playing sadly with some little stones on the ground. And she pulled out strength from where she did not know she had it. She used mud from the stream mixed with dry straw to try to plug the largest holes between the wall stones. It was dirty, exhausting, and humiliating work. "Look at me, Elvira," María thought with rage as she smeared mud on the wall with her own hands. "Look at me building a house with garbage. Do you think you have defeated me? You have no idea who I am. You have no idea what a mother can do." By mid-afternoon, she had managed to build a miserable shed. It was barely a roof of branches, leaves, and mud in a corner of the ruins. It was not airtight. It was not warm. But it was something. It cut the wind. She dropped to the ground, exhausted, looking at her work. It looked like an animal's burrow. She felt a wave of shame. Antonio, her prince, had treated her like a queen. And now she lived in the mud. The humiliation burned more than the wounds on her hands. The following days passed in a fog of monotonous suffering. 1, 2, 3 days. Maria's small supply of energy was running out. Josue was pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and he had stopped asking when they would go home. He had simply turned off. The vibrant, happy boy was becoming a silent shadow that followed her with big, sad eyes. María tried to fish in the stream without success. She tried to set traps for birds with threads from her own clothes, but she failed. Hunger became a constant pain, a cramp that did not let her think clearly. Her appearance transformed. Her hair, once shiny and combed, was now tangled and full of dust. Her black clothes were in tatters from the thorns and stained with dry mud. She smelled of smoke from the small fires she managed to make by rubbing sticks with infinite patience, of sweat and of desperation. One afternoon, while María was trying to wash Josue's shirt in the river by beating it against the stones with impotent rage, she broke. She dropped the garment into the water and covered her face with her dirty hands. A heartbreaking scream came from her throat, a howl that scared away the nearby birds. "I cannot do this anymore," she shouted at the sky. "I cannot, Antonio. Help me. God, if you exist, do not let me see my son die of hunger." She cried until she had no tears left. She felt like the most miserable creature on the face of the earth. What good was it to be good? What good was it to have loved and cared for her husband? Life was punishing her for no reason. Then she felt a small hand on her shoulder. She turned. It was Josue. The boy was holding a yellow flower, a small wild herb that had grown among the rocks. "Do not cry, Mommy," the boy said with a seriousness that did not correspond to his age. "Look, I found this for you. It is pretty like you." María looked at the flower, a small fragile thing being born in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thorns. She looked at her son, dirty, hungry, but offering her comfort when he was the one who needed it most. That gesture ignited a bonfire inside her, a warmth that did not come from the sun or fire. It was pride. It was pure love. She hugged Josue and kissed his dirty forehead. "Thank you, my love. It is beautiful. You are right. I will not cry anymore. We are going to be okay. I promise you, Josue. Even if I have to move the earth with my teeth, we are going to be okay." It was at that moment of determination, when María was drying her tears with the back of her hand and putting the flower in her tangled hair, that they heard the sound. A strange sound in that place of silence and wind. The roar of an engine. The sound came from the dirt road below. María jumped to her feet, her heart racing. Someone was coming to help them. Don Miguel, the old friend from town. Maybe someone had taken pity. She ran to the edge of the hillside with Josue at her heels to see the road. But when she saw the vehicle, her blood froze in her veins. The hope that had sprouted a second ago turned to ash instantly. It was not a rescue truck. It was not a friend. It was a shiny black car, slowly climbing the stone road like a giant metallic beetle. María recognized the license plate immediately. She knew that car. She had traveled in it many times. It was Dona Elvira's car. Panic took hold of Mara. Dona Elvira was not coming to bring food. She was not coming to ask for forgiveness. If that woman was climbing up to this stone hell, it could only be for one reason. She wanted to make sure they were suffering. She wanted to see the spectacle of their misery in the front row. Mara looked back at her miserable hut of branches and mud, at her home. Then she looked at herself, dirty and ragged. "Hide Josue," Maria said with an urgent voice, gently pushing the boy toward the hole in the wall. "Stay there and do not come out, no matter what happens." "Is it the bad grandmother?" the boy asked with fear. "Yes, it is grandmother. But she will not hurt you because I am here. Just do not let her see you cry." Maria smoothed her torn dress, lifted her chin, and stood in front of the entrance to the ruins. Her legs trembled with weakness, but her gaze was steel. She was going to receive the harpy standing. She would not give her the pleasure of seeing her on her knees. The car stopped a few meters away. The engine turned off. The door opened, and there began the real psychological hell. The sound of the car door closing echoed like a gunshot in the silence of the ruins. Clack, a dry, expensive, perfect sound. Maria stood motionless, standing in front of her precarious construction of mud and branches. Like a she-wolf defending her den. She smoothed her dirty dress with a nervous movement, useless given the evident misery that surrounded her. She knew she could not hide reality. She and her son looked like castaways forgotten by civilization. Dona Elvira got out of the vehicle with calculated slowness. First a black heel shoe came out, impeccable, stepping carefully on the road stones. Then she emerged with her dark sunglasses and a silk scarf tied around her neck that waved in the mountain breeze. The old woman walked toward them, carefully avoiding puddles of mud that Maria had crossed barefoot 1,000 times in recent days. She did not take off her glasses. Maria could not see her eyes, but she felt her scrutiny burning her skin. Well, Elvira said as she came within a few steps. Her voice was calm, conversational, as if she were commenting on the weather. "You are still breathing. I must admit I am surprised. I bet the lawyer that in 2 days you would be back in town begging for alms in the plaza." Maria clenched her fists at her sides, digging her dirty nails into her palms. "What do you want, Elvira?" Maria asked, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "We have nothing left to take. You already took everything." Elvira let out a dry little laugh and slowly removed her glasses, revealing those cold, critical eyes. "I am not coming to take anything from you, girl. What could I want from this dump? I am coming to inspect my adjoining property. And by the way, I wanted to see with my own eyes how the lady of the house adapts to her true natural environment." The mother-in-law's gaze traveled up and down Maria's body. She stopped at the tangled hair, at the torn dress, at the bare, weathered feet. "Look at you, Maria," Elvira whispered with disdain, making a face of disgust. "You look like a wild beast, a savage animal. I always knew that fine clothes and jewels were not for you. Antonio tried to disguise you as a lady, but you cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Here, among the stones and the earth, this is where you fit. Finally you are in your place." The words stuck like hot needles in Maria's chest. Shame flooded her, a red, suffocating wave. She wanted to shout at her that she was a dignified woman, a mother, a beloved wife. But hunger and exhaustion had stolen her strength to fight verbally. She could only lower her gaze, feeling the weight of humiliation crushing her shoulders. At that moment, Joseph, who had been spying from the hole in the wall, could not take it anymore. Fear of his grandmother fought against a stronger biological need, hunger. He came out of his hiding place, small, fragile, with sunken eyes in his dirty little face. "Grandmother," he asked in a thread of a voice. Maria tried to stop him, but the boy ran staggering toward the woman who until a week ago gave him cold kisses and expensive gifts on his birthdays. Elvira took an instinctive step back, as if she feared the boy would dirty her. "Grandmother," Joseph repeated, stopping a meter from her. "Did you bring bread?" The silence that followed was deafening. The wind whistled through the cracks. Maria felt her heart stop. Her son, the grandson of the richest family in the region, was begging for a piece of bread. Maria took a step forward, trying to rescue her son's dignity. "Josua, come here. Do not ask her for anything." But Elvira raised a hand, silencing Maria, and looked at the boy. For a second, Maria hoped to see a flash of humanity. After all, he was blood of her blood. He was Antonio's son. How could a grandmother deny food to a skeletal child? Elvira put her hand in her purse. Josua smiled weakly, his eyes lighting up with pure hope. He expected a candy, a coin, a sandwich, anything. But Elvira took out a handkerchief, wiped an invisible speck of dust from her jacket, and put her empty hand back. "It is a sin to beg, child," Elvira said with a coldness that froze the air. "Bread is for those who work. Bread is for people of worth." "I am hungry, grandmother," the boy insisted, starting to cry. "My belly hurts." Elvira let out a short, cruel laugh without humor. She leaned slightly toward him, not to hug him, but to whisper a sentence. "Well, tell your mother to stop whining and start acting." She made a vague gesture toward the rocks full of vermin. "There is a lot of life here. Lizards, field rats. I mean, if you are so hungry, tell your mother to cook rats for you. That is what animals eat, right? And looking at you so dirty, you do not look very different from one." Maria felt something break inside her. It was not pain. It was the sound of submission breaking to give way to fury. Josua's crying became louder at his grandmother's response. He put his hands to his face, ashamed and rejected. Maria ran to her son, lifted him in her arms, and pressed him against her chest, protecting his ears, his heart, his soul from that witch. "Get out of here," Maria shouted. Her voice no longer trembled. It was a guttural roar. "Get off my land, Elvira." Elvira raised an amused eyebrow at the reaction. "Your land? Do you call this pile of rubble land? Please, Maria, have some decency." The old woman walked toward one of the main walls, the one Maria had tried to reinforce with so much effort the previous afternoon using mud from the river. She looked at it with critical contempt, like a health inspector in a slaughterhouse. "This is pathetic," Elvira murmured. Then, with a casual but strong movement, she lifted her leg and delivered a dry kick to the base of the old wall. Crack. The blow made the structure vibrate. Some of the dry mud that Maria had placed with her bleeding fingers broke off and fell to the ground, turning to dust. A small stone rolled. The wall creaked ominously. Maria took a step back, terrified that everything would collapse on them. "You are crazy," Maria shrieked. "You are going to knock it down. It is our only shelter." Elvira brushed the dust off her expensive shoe, satisfied with the demonstration of the structure's fragility. "I am doing you a favor, you fool," Elvira said, looking her in the eyes with pure malice. "You should thank me. These walls are as rotten as you are. Any day now, while you sleep hugging in your filth, these old stones are going to give way. They are going to come down." Boom. She made a dramatic gesture with her hands simulating an explosion. "And they are going to crush you both like cockroaches," she continued with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "And no one, listen to me well, Maria, no one in town is going to shed a tear. They will say it was a regrettable accident. The poor widow and her illegitimate son, crushed by their own misery. It will be the poetic end to your sad story." Maria felt like she could not breathe. The image of Josue crushed under the rocks, planted in her mind by that woman, made her dizzy. "You are a monster," Maria whispered with tears of rage running down her dirty face. "God is watching you, Dona Elvira. God sees everything. God is busy helping those who help themselves," Elvira replied, turning to leave. "And you are only good for pity. Enjoy your rat feast, dear. Oh, and watch out for the wind. Tonight they say it is going to blow hard. I hope your house of cards holds up." The old woman walked back to her car, swinging her hips, triumphant. She had achieved what she wanted. She had not only seen them suffer, she had taken away their hope. She had planted the fear of death in their own shelter. The car started and drove away, raising a cloud of dust that covered mother and son, making them cough. Maria stood there hugging Josua, coughing, crying, and trembling. But this time the trembling was not from cold. She looked at the wall Elvira had kicked. The place where the heel had hit had left a mark. The mud had fallen away, revealing a bit more of the deep crack that ran through the stone. Josua cried on her shoulder, "Mama, are we cockroaches? Are we going to die crushed?" Maria gently pushed the boy away, took his face with both hands, and looked him in the eyes with a terrifying intensity. "No, Josie. Look at me. We are not cockroaches. We are not rats." Maria stood up, dried her tears with her arm, leaving a streak of mud on her cheek that looked like war paint. She went to the wall, right where Elvira had kicked. She put her hand on the cold, old stone. "This old witch thinks she can knock us down," she said quietly, speaking more to herself than to the boy. "She thinks these walls are our tomb, but she is wrong." Maria felt a strange vibration when she touched the wall. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe it was the adrenaline. But for a moment it seemed to her that the stone was warm. She turned toward her son, and for the first time in days her eyes reflected not desperation, but fierce determination. Elvira's hatred had ignited a flame that hunger could not extinguish. "Josua, we are going to fix this wall. We are going to make it so strong that not even an earthquake can knock it down. And I swear to you by the memory of your father that that woman will swallow every one of her words. One day she will wish for the crumbs she denied you today." Maria did not know how, but she felt something had changed. The harpy's visit, intended to destroy them, had achieved the opposite. It had killed the submissive Maria and awakened the warrior Maria. Night fell again on the ruins on the hillside. But that night Maria did not sleep for fear of scorpions. She did not sleep because she stayed staring at the crack in the wall, that same crack Elvira had kicked. There was something in it. The wind did not whistle the same way when passing through there. It was a different sound, deeper, like a metallic whisper. "Be careful," Elvira had said. "Any day it will collapse." Little did the old woman know that by trying to tear down their world, she was about to open the door to a completely new universe. Because sometimes to find a treasure, you first have to break the surface. And Dona Elvira, in her wickedness, had just given the first necessary blow. 2 days after Elvira's cruel visit, the sky over the ruins on the hillside changed color. It was not the usual leaden gray of sad rain. It was a purplish black, a bruised and violent color that foretold disaster. The air became heavy and electric. The birds stopped singing and hid. The silence before the storm was dense, sticky. Maria, who was washing some rags in the stream with hands full of sores, felt a chill that made her skin stand on end. "Josie," she shouted, dropping the wet clothes. "Josua, come here right now." The boy, who was playing by stacking little stones near the main wall, ran toward her when he saw the panic in her eyes. "What is wrong, Mummy?" "A bad storm is coming, son. We have to take shelter. Quick, help me get the dry firewood under the roof." They worked against the clock. The wind began to blow suddenly, not like a breeze, but like invisible slaps that lifted dust and dry leaves, hitting them in the face. The sky roared. A deep thunder that seemed to come from the center of the earth made the stones vibrate under their feet. They barely managed to get into their small shelter of branches and mud when the sky opened. It did not rain. It poured down. It was as if they were under a giant waterfall. Water fell with such force that it hurt. The precarious roof that Maria had built with so much effort and pride days earlier began to drip in seconds. First a drop, then a stream. Then water went through the branches as if they were paper. Maria and Josua huddled in the deepest corner, where the 2 original stone walls met. Maria sat the boy on her lap and covered him with her own body, bending her back to be a human shield against the freezing water and the wind that tried to tear off the branches. "I am scared, Mama," Josua shouted, but his voice could barely be heard over the roar of thunder. The house is going to fall. Grandmother said so. No, Maria shouted, hugging him so tightly her arms hurt. These stones have been here 200 years. They are not going to fall. Close your eyes and pray with me. Crack, boom. Lightning struck a few meters away, illuminating the ruins with a white, ghostly light. For a fraction of a second, Maria saw her son's face lit up. He was pale, terrified, with wide eyes. The wind howled like a wounded animal. The branch shed creaked and shook violently. Suddenly, a gust of wind stronger than the others tore off part of the improvised roof. The branches flew away and the cold water hit them full on. Maria began to cry. She could not help it. They were soaked, freezing, sitting in the mud. The place she had tried to turn into a home was now a mud pool. Why? Maria sobbed, looking at the black sky as water hit her face and entered her eyes. That is enough. You already took everything from us. Leave us alone. The storm seemed to laugh at her. The rain intensified, and then it happened. Perhaps it was the vibration of the constant thunder. Perhaps it was the water that seeped into the ancient cracks of the adobe, softening it. Or perhaps it was the aftermath of Dona Elvira's kick days earlier that had weakened the structure at the critical point. A dull sound was heard, a heavy tearing, rip, crash. Before Marla's terrified eyes, a large section of the inner wall lining, right the wall they had in front of them, collapsed. Blocks of dry mud and small stones fell to the ground with a crash, splashing dirty water. Mara's heart stopped. She thought the whole wall was coming down on them. Watch out, she screamed, turning to completely cover Josu with her back, waiting for the crushing impact that would end their lives, just as Elvira had predicted. She waited for the final blow. She closed her eyes, entrusting her soul to God. 1, 2, 3 seconds. Nothing else happened. Only the sound of the rain. Mara opened one eye, trembling uncontrollably. She looked over her shoulder. The wall had not completely fallen. Only the plaster had fallen. The outer layer of old mud and dirt that covered the stones. Where before there had been a smooth, boring wall of grey mud, now there was an ugly hole, an irregular scar in the wall. We are okay, my love. We are okay. Only a piece of earth fell, Mara whispered, rocking Josie. Hours passed. The storm raged all afternoon like a beast that refuses to die, until finally, exhausted, it began to fade. If you have ever felt that after the storm comes a strange, unsettling but beautiful calm, give a like now. But listen well. What the rain washed away was not just mud. Water washed the surface to reveal the truth. If you left now, you would miss the exact moment when luck changes. And believe me, it changes in a second, in a flash. Are you ready to see what came out of that broken wall? When the rain finally ceased, it was already evening. The air was cold and smelled of wet earth and ozone. Everything was silent, a sacred silence that only exists after chaos. The dark clouds on the western horizon began to break. The sun, which was already low, about to hide behind the mountains, peeked out timidly. It was not a midday sun, white and hard. It was the sun of the golden hour, an orange, reddish, intense and almost solid light that bathed the drenched world and made it shine. Maria stood up, numb. She was soaked to the bone. Her teeth were chattering, and she felt like she had mud even in her soul. Josa, stay here sitting on these dry stones. I am going to see what we can save. The boy nodded, too tired to speak, wrapped in his mother's wet jacket. Mara walked toward the disaster. The ground was a swamp. Her small bed of leaves was ruined, her few belongings scattered. But her eyes went to the damaged wall. The section that had fallen during the storm had exposed the inner structure of the wall. Maria approached to assess the damage, worried that the wall would collapse on them during the night. Damn this luck, she muttered, bending down to pick up the pieces of fallen mud. Now I have a hole in my wall. More cold will get in. She stood and looked at the hole. It was deep. The layer of mud that had fallen was thick, almost 10 centimeters. Behind it, the stones did not seem to fit perfectly. There was a deep crack, a vertical fissure that went into the wall. At that precise instant, the sun descended one more degree on the horizon. A ray of sunlight, perfect, straight, and sharp as a sword of fire, crossed the valley, passed over the wet vegetation, and struck directly against the wall of the ruins. The ray entered the crack. Mara blinked, blinded by the sudden reflection in the puddle of water at her feet. But when she raised her eyes toward the crack in the wall, she froze. From the deep darkness of that dirty, old fissure, something returned the light. It was not the dull shine of a wet quartz stone. It was not the glassy reflection of a broken bottle. It was an intense, warm, vibrant flash. A fire-red glow and another golden one intertwined. Mara felt her mouth go dry. Her heart, which had been beating slow and heavy with sadness, gave a violent lurch. Thump thump. What was that? She looked around as if expecting someone else to have seen it, but they were alone at the end of the world. She took a step toward the wall, as if hypnotized. Her bare feet splashed in the mud, but she did not feel it. She only had eyes for that point of light coming from the bowels of her ruined house. The ray of sun would last only a few more minutes before the king star hid. She had to see what it was. Maria extended her hand. Her fingers trembled visibly. She did not want to touch it. She was afraid it was an optical illusion caused by hunger and fever. It is glass. It must be old glass, she told herself aloud, trying to be rational. She put her fingers in the crack. It was full of wet cobwebs and grit. Her nails scraped against something hard that was not stone. It did not have the rough texture of granite or the smoothness of adobe. It was something of cloth, of old leather, but it was hard, petrified. Maria dug a little harder, breaking the edge of the adobe with her nails. The hole became a little bigger. The ray of sun went deeper. The glow intensified. There it was. She could see a corner of something. It looked like the corner of an old bag, rotten by the centuries, which had torn. And coming out of that tear, peeking out like a secret eye, there was a round object. It was a coin, but it was not a normal coin. Even covered with centuries of dust, gold does not oxidize. Gold is eternal. The yellow metal shone under the evening sun with an insulting purity in the midst of so much poverty. And next to it, caught in the same mixture of earth and time, there was a red stone, rough uncut, the size of a walnut. A raw ruby. The ray of sun passed through it and projected a blood-colored light onto Maria's dirty hand. Maria withdrew her hand as if a snake had bitten her. She stepped back 2 steps, breathing heavily. "My God," she whispered. She brought her hands to her mouth. My God, it could not be true. She was hallucinating. Hunger had driven her mad. Finally she looked at Joshua, who was still sitting, oblivious to everything, watching the clouds. She looked back at the crack. The sun was beginning to hide and the glow was slowly fading, hiding the treasure again in the shadow of the crack. But she had seen it. She knew what she had seen. It was not just one coin. Looking more closely, she saw that the wall, that entire section of the wall, was not made of solid stones like the others. There were patterns. There were holes filled in. That wall was hollow. That wall was false. Maria fell to her knees in the mud, not from desperation this time, but from the weight of the revelation. Her legs did not hold her up. "You are crazy," Elvira had said. "Those walls are going to fall." Maria began to laugh. A nervous, hysterical laugh that mixed with crying. Tears ran down her face, cleaning the mud. "Mama, are you okay?" Joshua asked, scared to see his mother laugh and cry on the ground. Maria looked up. Her eyes, once dull and sad, now shone with a feverish light, a mixture of fear and euphoria. "Come here, Joshua," she said in a hoarse voice. "Come here." The boy approached. Maria hugged him and then, with trembling hands, pointed to the dark crack in the wall where the last ray of sun was dying. "Do you see that?" she asked. "It is dark, Mommy. It is a bug hole." "No, my love," Maria said, caressing the dirty wall as if it were the skin of a lover. "It is not a bug hole. Elvira sent us to live in the trash. She sent us to die in misery. But she did not know that ruins keep secrets. María picked up a stone from the ground, a sharp stone. Fatigue vanished. The cold disappeared. A wild adrenaline ran through her veins. She had to open it. She had to know if it was real or if it was a dream. "Josie," María said, standing up and squeezing the stone in her hand. "Get ready because I think Papa just sent us the gift he promised us." She raised her hand with the stone, ready to hit the adobe and break the false wall. The sound of the impact echoed in the silent valley. Crack! A larger piece fell. And what María saw then, what her eyes saw behind that second layer of mud, made her drop the stone and cover her mouth to stifle a scream. It was not one bag. There were dozens. They were walled up like bricks. The entire wall was filled. María was standing in front of an incalculable fortune, while outside the night was falling on her misery. María was breathing heavily, her heart pounding her ribs like a war drum. The last ray of sun had disappeared behind the mountains, and now darkness was beginning to reclaim the ruins on the hillside. But darkness no longer mattered. María had her own light shining before her eyes. She had broken a bit more of the adobe layer. Her fingers were bleeding. Her nails were broken to the raw flesh. But the physical pain had completely disappeared, anesthetized by shock. "It is gold, Josue. It is real gold," María whispered, her voice broken by a nervous laugh that bordered on crying. From the irregular hole she had opened in the wall, she carefully pulled out one of the objects blocking the passage. It was a small sack of black leather, brittle from humidity and years. When she tried to grab it, the rotten leather disintegrated in her hands like ash. And then it happened. The rain. When the container broke, its contents spilled out. A metallic torrent fell onto the dirty, muddy floor of the hut. Clink, clink, clink. Coins. Dozens of them, large, heavy, irregular. Some shone with the unmistakable luster of pure gold. Others had the silver tone of oxidized silver. But they all weighed an eternity in the hand. María took one. It was cold. It had strange inscriptions, ancient shields that she did not recognize. She rubbed the surface with her dirty thumb, and the yellow metal shone defiantly. It was not a fantasy. It was not pyrite. It was pure hard wealth. "Are they pirate coins?" Josue asked, approaching timidly. His little eyes, which minutes before were dull from hunger, now reflected the glow of the treasure scattered in the mud. "I do not know, my love. I do not know." María began to pick up the coins frantically, potting them in the torn pockets of her skirt, in her neckline, in the old boots. "Help me pick them up. Do not leave a single one in the mud." Mother and son crawled on the ground, digging like moles in the growing darkness. Every time María touched a coin, she felt an electric shock. "With this I buy bread for a year," she thought as she grabbed one. "With this I buy coats. With this I can pay for a hotel and get out of this hell tonight." But euphoria soon gave way to a much more dangerous emotion, panic. Suddenly María stopped short. She stood up and looked around. They had no door, they had no roof. Anyone could see them. The road was nearby. If someone passed by, if Elvira returned, if some vagabond decided to take shelter there. María felt a cold terror that froze her blood more than the storm. Now she had something to lose. Before, if someone came in, they would only find misery. Now, if someone came in, they could kill them for what they had. "Hide that," María hissed, grabbing Josie's hand. "Put it all under the stone, quick." "But Mama, can we buy food?" "No." Silence. María covered the hole in the wall with the same mud and stones that had fallen, working with feverish desperation. She wanted to erase the evidence. She wanted the wall to look like just a broken wall, not the entrance to a treasure chamber. That night was the longest of all. María did not sleep a single second. She sat in front of the patched wall with a heavy stick in one hand and a sharp stone in the other. Her eyes, red and bulging, watched the darkness. Every sound of the wind, every creak of a branch, seemed to her like a thief approaching. Wealth had not brought her immediate peace. It had brought her paralyzing fear. She was the guardian of a secret too big for her tired shoulders. Dawn came slowly and foggy. Maria remained in the same position, rigid as a gargoyle, protecting her sleeping son and her hidden treasure. Around 8 in the morning she heard footsteps. They were not the steps of a car. They were bootsteps, slow, heavy, dragging a little on the gravel. Maria jumped up. Panic took over her. "Who is there?" she shouted, raising the stick. "Do not come closer, I have a weapon." A figure appeared in the morning fog. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, a fishing vest full of pockets, and leaned on a carved wooden cane. Maria lowered the stick slightly but did not lower her guard. She recognized that silhouette. It was Don Miguel. Don Miguel was the town historian, a 70-year-old man with a white beard and kind eyes behind thick glasses. He was known for spending his life excavating in the hills, looking for relics of the old civil wars and local legends. He had been a friend of Antonio's father. "Maria," Don Miguel exclaimed, stopping at a prudent distance and raising his hands in a sign of peace. "For the love of God, girl, lower that. It is me, Miguel." Maria trembled. What was he doing there? Did he know something? Could the smell of gold attract people? "Don Miguel," she stammered. "What do you want?" "We have nothing here. Go away." The old man sighed and approached slowly with a look full of pity. "I heard what that harpy Elvira did," he said, shaking his head. "The whole town knows, although no one dares to say anything. It hurt my soul to think that you and Antonio's family were here in the open. I brought something." Don Miguel took off his backpack and pulled out a thermos of hot coffee and a paper bag with fresh rolls. The smell of freshly baked bread hit Mara like a punch, weakening her defense. Josu woke up with the smell. "Bread," the boy shouted, running toward the old man. Mara could not stop him. She watched her son devour the roll Don Miguel offered him and felt tears return to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, dropping the stick and falling to her knees from exhaustion. "Thank you, Don Miguel. God bless you." The old man poured her a cup of hot coffee. "Drink, daughter. You look terrible. That woman will pay for this. I assure you, karma exists." Mara took the coffee with trembling hands. The warmth of the liquid comforted her body, but her mind was still on the wall. Unconsciously, her eyes drifted toward the fresh mud patch that covered the hole. Don Miguel, who had spent 50 years looking for treasures and reading the land, noticed Maria's nervous look. He followed the direction of her eyes. He saw the collapsed wall. He saw the pile of removed earth. And he saw something else. Between the mud on the ground shone something that Maria had missed in the darkness, a solitary coin, half buried. Don Miguel approached, curious. "Did the wall fall with the storm?" he asked, bending down. "Do not touch there," Maria shouted, jumping to get in the way. But it was too late. Don Miguel had already picked up the coin. The old man cleaned it with his sleeve and adjusted his glasses. His eyes opened like plates. His hand began to tremble. "Holy heaven," he murmured. "Mada, where did this come from?" Mada was speechless. Her breath was cut. She was discovered. "I found it on the ground. It is fake, right? It is old junk." Don Miguel slowly stood up and looked at Maria with an intensity that scared her. But there was no greed in his eyes. There was pure astonishment, the look of an archaeologist in front of the Holy Grail. "No, Maria," he said in a solemn voice. "This is not junk. This is a Spanish ounce of gold from 1790. He walked toward the wall, ignoring Maria's weak protest, and ran his hand over the hole she had tried to cover. With his cane he gently tapped the adjacent stones. "Tock, tock, tock. They are hollow. Do you know what these ruins are, girl?" he asked, turning toward her. Mara shook her head, crying with fear. Dona Elvira said it was sterile land, that it was worthless. "Elvira is an ignorant fool," Don Miguel laughed, an incredulous laugh. "These walls, Maria. You are standing on the crossroads post. Local legend says that during the War of Independence, a group of smugglers and rebel generals used an old farm on the hillside to hide the war capital. It was said they had walled up the fortune before being ambushed and executed in the valley." Miguel looked at the wall, then looked at Mara's dirty, injured hands. For 100 years, treasure hunters dug in the ground, in the tunnels, in the mountain caves. But no one thought of the walls. They thought they were simple coral walls. The old man approached Maria and put his hands on her shoulders. "Maria, do you have any idea what is in there?" "I saw many bags," she confessed in a whisper. "They were shining, and red stones, rubies," Miguel stated. "The lost treasure of the Sierra. It is not an old man's story, it is real, and it is here." Maria felt her legs fail again. "Is it mine?" she asked. "The key. Elvira gave me the key. She put the property in my name. She said it was mine and my bastard's." Don Miguel smiled, a wide, complicit smile. "If the property is in your name, and if she ceded the ruins and all their content to you, as the deed surely says, to wash her hands of the legal responsibility of the ruinous structure, then, my dear Maria, according to the law of findings and treasures, you are the absolute owner of everything these walls contain. But listen to me well, Maria." Miguel's tone changed. He became serious, urgent. "You have to be very, very smart now." "Why?" she asked, caressing Josiah's head as he happily ate his second roll, oblivious to the fact that he was now a millionaire child. "Because this is an immense fortune. We are talking about millions, Maya. Millions. And money calls envy." Don Miguel looked toward the road, toward where the great Gakanja mansion could be seen in the distance in the valley. "Elvira hates you," the historian continued. "She hates you because she thinks you are inferior. But if she finds out that she gave you, out of spite, the greatest fortune in the region, her hatred will turn into war. She will try to take it from you. She will use lawyers. She will use tricks. She will use force if necessary. She despised me," Mara said, feeling a new strength born in her chest. "She threw me here to die." "Exactly. And that is why we cannot make mistakes. Do not take the gold out yet. Do not run to the bank with your pockets full. That would raise suspicions. We have to document it. We need the sheriff and a notary here before we move a single stone. Will you help me?" Maria asked, looking for an ally in the midst of loneliness. "I am going to protect history, and I am going to protect you," the old man promised. "Because I would hate to see that treasure end up paying for that evil witch's whims. This is divine justice, Maria. God has given you the sword to defend yourself." At that moment, Mara looked at her dirty hands. She no longer saw them as ugly. She saw them as capable. She looked at the broken wall. She no longer saw a miserable refuge. She saw a bank. She saw Josue's future. She saw university. She saw a house with heating. She saw abundant food. And then she looked toward the valley, toward Elvira's house. "Let her come," Maria whispered with a coldness that surprised Don Miguel. "Let her come see what she has done." What Maria and Miguel did not know was that fate was speeding up the plans. While they talked, in the Garcia mansion, Dona Elvira was looking through the window toward the hill with binoculars. She had seen the flash. She did not know what it was, but her predator instinct told her that something unusual was happening in the ruins. And her greed would not let her sit still. Don Miguel had left barely an hour ago, promising to return with the sheriff and a notary before noon. "Do not touch anything, Maria. Do not breathe hard. Guard the treasure like you are a dragon," he had said with a wink before disappearing down the path with his tired but hopeful step. Maria was left alone with Josue. The silence returned to reign over the ruins on the hillside, but this time the silence was not one of peace, but of unbearable tension. Maria could not take her eyes off the wall patched with mud. She knew what was behind it. Every centimeter of that stone hid ingots, coins, rubies. She knew that there, less than a meter away, was the difference between Josua begging for alms or going to the best university in the country. She sat on the ground with her heart beating in her throat. Every minute that passed without Don Miguel returning felt like an hour. She looked at the imaginary clock. She looked at the sky. She looked at the road. "Mama, why are you sweating? It is cold," Josua asked, nibbling on the last piece of roll the historian had left them. I am nervous, my love. I am just waiting for Mr. Miguel to come back so he can help us clean the house." Mara lied piously. She did not want to scare the boy with the magnitude of the secret. She stood up and paced back and forth. She felt an itch on the back of her neck, a dark premonition. Her instinct, sharpened by days of survival and fear, screamed at her that something was wrong. The air felt dense again, although the sky was clear. Then she heard it. It was not the sound of a soft, luxurious car engine like last time. It was a low roar, a guttural, mechanical, deep sound. It came from the valley, climbing the steep slope. Maria stopped dead. The small stones on the ground began to vibrate, colliding with each other. The water in the remaining puddle from the rain rippled. "Is it thunder, Mommy?" Josue asked, dropping the bread and running to cling to his mother's skirt. "No, there are no clouds, Josue." The noise grew louder, more aggressive. It smelled of black smoke, of burnt fuel, that acrid smell that invades the pure country air when industry invades nature. Maria ran to the edge of the hillside to look at the access road. What she saw made her turn pale until her skin looked like paper. Climbing up the dirt road, crushing the bushes and raising a cloud of grey dust, came a huge yellow machine. An excavator. Its mechanical arm swung like the trunk of an iron elephant, and its front shovel gleamed in the sun, ready to bite the earth. Behind the machine, at a safe distance from the dust, came Dona Elvira's black car. Panic hit Marta in the stomach like a hammer blow. "Oh my God," she screamed. "No, no, no," she understood instantly. Elvira was not coming to insult. Elvira was not coming to bring rotten food. Elvira was coming to demolish. If that machine touched the wall, if that shovel hit the false wall, the gold would fall. It would spill on the ground before Elvira's eyes, before the eyes of the workers. And Maria knew exactly what would happen. Elvira would claim everything. She would say it was on her old land. Or worse, in the chaos of the demolition, the treasure would be buried under tons of rubble, lost forever. Or stolen by the workers in the confusion. Or worst of all, the unstable walls would fall on them. "Josue," Maria shouted, turning toward the boy with terrifying urgency. "Run behind the big rock. Go to the back where we slept the first night and do not come out. But the machine is coming. I am scared. Obi me. Run." Maria smoothed her dirty hair with trembling hands and ran toward the non-existent entrance of the ruins to intercept them. She had no weapons. She had no sheriff. She only had her body and her desperation. The excavator arrived at the flat area in front of the ruins and stopped. But it did not turn off the engine. The noise was deafening. Black smoke poured out of the vertical exhaust, enveloping Maria in a toxic cloud that made her cough. Elvira's car stopped beside it. The rear window lowered automatically. There she was, impeccable made up, with a triumphant smile painted on her red lips. "Good morning, dear daughter-in-law." Elvira shouted to be heard over the roar of the engine. "I see you are still here, clinging to the filth like a tick." Maria planted herself in front of the car, waving her arms. "What does this mean?" Maria shouted, her voice hoarse. "What is that machine doing here?" Elvira opened the door and got out, this time unafraid of the mud because she wore high designer boots. She adjusted her sunglasses and looked at the ruins with feigned disgust. "I have made an executive decision, Maria," Elvira said, walking toward her but keeping her distance. "Yesterday I was thinking about you. I thought about my poor grandson living in these unsanitary conditions." "You were thinking about your grandson?" Mara spat with disbelief. "You sent us here to die. Interpretations. Interpretations." Elvira waved her hand, dismissing it. "The point is that I have realized that allowing you to live in this unstable structure is a legal risk for me. Do you remember that the crack almost fell the other day? Well, as a responsible citizen, I have decided to demolish the dangerous ruins." Marta felt her blood freeze. "You cannot do that," she shouted. "You gave me the property. I have the key. It is my house. It is a pile of rotten stones." Elvira shouted, losing her composure for a second. And I have a municipal permit for sanitation and landscape cleaning. My lawyers are very efficient, dear. They are going to tear all this down. I am going to clean the view from my mansion. I do not want to see your rags hanging or your miserable face every morning when I have my tea." Elvira turned toward the machine operator, a large man with a helmet and reflective vest who looked at the scene with boredom from the cabin. "Go ahead, Martinez," Elvira ordered. "Start with the west wall. I want everything down in an hour." The west wall was the treasure wall. It was the wall where the sun had revealed the secret. The excavator engine roared louder. The metal treads screeched as they moved forward. The giant shovel rose in the air, menacing, casting a terrible shadow over Maria. Time stopped. Maria looked at the metal shovel. She looked at the wall where her future was. She looked at Elvira smiling with cruelty. If the machine hit, it was all over. She did not think. There was no time for logic. Maria ran. She threw herself directly toward the west wall and planted herself with her back to the wall, opening her arms in a cross. She was right in the path of the immense mechanical shovel. "No," she shouted with all her might. "Only over my dead body." The machine operator, surprised by the woman's madness, braked hard. The shovel swung violently in the air, stopping only 2 meters from Maria's head. The man opened the cabin door and stuck his head out. "Mrs. Elvira," the operator shouted, "there is a person in the middle. I cannot work like this." Maria was trembling from head to toe. The heat from the machine's engine burned her face. The fear of being crushed was real, tangible. But her feet were nailed to the earth like roots. "Get out of here," Maria shouted at the driver with tears of terror running down her cheeks. "This is my house. You are not a murderer. Do not do it." Dona Elvira, seeing that the machine had stopped, entered a state of blind fury. Her plan of humiliation and destruction was being interrupted by the peasant's obstinacy. She walked furiously toward the machine, her boots pounding the ground. "What are you doing? Stopped, you imbecile!" Elvira roared toward the operator. "I pay you to demolish, not to give opinions. But ma'am, the woman will not move. I could hurt her." Elvira looked at Maria. She saw the defiance in her daughter-in-law's eyes. She saw that Maria had lost her fear of the Garcia authority and was now fighting with something more than words. And that enraged her more than anything. She could not stand disobedience. "She will move," Elvira shouted. "She is a coward. No one wants to die for a pile of stones." Then she directed her poisonous gaze directly at Maria. "Last chance, Maria," the mother-in-law warned, pointing at the road with a gloved finger. "Grab your son and get off my land forever. Go back to your village. Disappear. Or I swear by the memory of my son that I will tear down that wall with you stuck to it." Maria looked at the wall behind her head. She could feel the vibration of the treasure as if the gold coins were singing, asking to be freed. It was not just money. It was justice. It was God's retribution. "No," Maria said. Her voice was low but firm. She lifted her chin. "This is my land. You gave it to me. And if you want to tear it down, you will have to bury me right here." The silence that followed was absolute, only broken by the idling of the diesel engine. Elvira turned red with rage. The veins in her neck swelled. Her hatred toward Maria had reached the boiling point, completely clouding her judgment. "Very well," Elvira shouted, turning toward the driver. "You asked for it." Elvira looked at the operator with crazy eyes. "Tear it down," she ordered with a high-pitched shriek. "Go forward. Knock down the wall. Run over her if necessary. She will move when she sees the teeth of the shovel. Do it now or I will fire you and make sure you never work in this state again." The order was criminal. It was an attempt at murder. The driver, pressured by the most powerful woman in the region and fearing for his job, hesitated. He looked at Maria, small and fragile, against the wall. He looked at Elvira, red with rage. "I said now," Elvira shouted, hitting the metal tread with her purse. The man, with sweat running down his forehead, got back into the cabin. He closed the door. The engine roared, revving up. Vroom, Maria saw the shovel rise higher. She saw the hydraulic gears tense. The machine began to move forward. 0.5 meter, 1 meter. The shadow of the shovel completely covered Maria. "Mama," Josu shouted from his hiding place, running out when he saw that the monster was going to eat his mother. Maria closed her eyes and extended her arms even more, protecting with her body the crack, protecting the gold, protecting dignity. "Please, Don Miguel, hurry," she prayed. "Antonio, help me." She felt the wind from the metal approaching. She felt the vibration in her teeth. She was going to die. She was going to die crushed. But she would not move. The screech of metal against stone was about to sound. The shovel was centimeters from hitting the upper wall to knock it down on her. And in that final second, when the world seemed to end, another sound was heard. Sirens. Many sirens. But the machine could not stop so quickly. The momentum of the blow was already launched. Everything happened in slow motion. Time stretched like a rubber band about to break. The police siren howled nearby, getting louder and louder. But the mechanical shovel of the excavator had already overcome inertia. The driver, with his eyes bulging with fear at seeing he could not stop in time, pulled the levers back desperately. But tons of steel do not stop in a centimeter. The shovel descended. "Maria, get out of there." Strong arms charged with adrenaline inappropriate for a 70-year-old man surrounded her waist. It was Don Miguel. The old man had arrived running from the sheriff's car, jumping stones and puddles, and threw himself on her like a football player in the last second of the game. Both rolled on the muddy ground, moving away from the wall just at the instant that the steel teeth of the machine impacted against the structure. Crackong. The sound was terrifying. The shovel hit the top of the west wall with brutal violence. The old wall of adobe and stone, weakened by centuries and storms, did not resist. Not only did a hole open, the entire structure gave way. Maria, stunned and covered in mud in Don Miguel's arms, lifted her head expecting to see a cloud of grey dust and deadly stones. She expected to see the destruction of her only refuge, but what she saw made her heart stop. What everyone present saw, Elvira, the machine driver, the sheriff who was getting out of the patrol car with his hand on his weapon, and little Josua from his hiding place, was something that defied logic. The wall opened like a giant pie at a hit by the hand of God. When the false masonry broke, the rotten leather containers that were stacked inside the wall burst. There was no dust. There was a metallic sound, a musical sound. Ting, 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 crash, clink. A yellow cascade poured out from the bowels of the wall. Hundreds, thousands of gold coins fell to the ground in a sparkling avalanche. They bounced on the stones. They rolled through the mud. They collided with each other. And among the gold shone intense red flashes. Rubies the size of quail eggs fell mixed with the precious metal. The morning sunlight, which had just fully emerged, struck the mountain of treasure forming at the foot of the collapsed ruins. The brilliance was so intense it hurt to look at it. It was a river of solid fire. The silence that followed the roar of the collapse was sepulchral. Even the machine, whose engine had stalled from the impact, stopped roaring. No one breathed. Mara slowly sat up, trembling. She looked at the mountain of gold in front of her. It was more than she had imagined. It was the booty of an entire army. Dona Elvira was petrified next to her car. Her sunglasses had slid to the tip of her nose. Her mouth was open in a perfect, grotesque O. Her mind, poisoned by years of materialism, took 3 seconds to process what her eyes saw. Broken wall, yellow glow, infinite wealth. Understanding hit her like lightning. She forgot her hatred toward Maria. She forgot her dignity as a great lady. She forgot the sheriff was there. Pure black, viscous greed took control of her body. "It is mine," Elvira shrieked with a voice that did not seem human. The old woman ran. She ran with her designer boots, stumbling, slipping in the mud, waving her arms like a madwoman toward the mountain of coins. "It is my land," she screamed as she threw herself to the ground, sinking her knees in the filthy mud, staining her $1,000 Chanel suit. They are my ruins. It is the Garcio gold. Elvira began to grab handfuls of coins, stuffing them in her pockets, in her purse, pressing them against her chest. She laughed and cried at the same time. Her gloved hands clawed at the earth, desperate to possess more. She looked like a demon possessed by gold fever. Back, she shouted at Maria, although Maria had not moved. "Stay away, you thieving peasant. This was in my house. No one is going to take it from me." It was a pathetic scene. The richest woman in town, wallowing in mud like an animal, blinded by ambition. Maria watched the scene with a mixture of horror and pity. She realized in that instant how poor her mother-in-law really was. She had money but had no soul. "Stop right there," a commanding voice thundered. Sheriff Ramirez, a robust, serious man who had been enforcing the law in the county for 30 years, walked toward the pile of gold with his hand on his belt. Don Miguel stood up and helped Maria to her feet, brushing the dust off her with tender protection. "Sheriff, thank God you arrived," Elvira shouted, her teeth stained with lipstick and her eyes bulging, clutching the coins against her chest. "Stop this woman. She tried to steal my treasure. It was hidden on my land. I ordered the demolition and I found it. It is all mine." The sheriff looked at Elvira with contempt. Then he looked at Don Miguel, who nodded with deadly calm. "Mrs. Elvira," the sheriff said calmly, "drop that. It is evidence for now." "Evidence of what?" she roared. "It is my property. These are the ruins on the hillside. They belonged to the Gasca family for generations." It was then that Don Miguel stepped forward. He took out of his old jacket a folded paper. It was not a weapon, but it was much more dangerous. "You are wrong, Dona Elvira," the historian said in a clear, powerful voice. "Do you recognize this document?" Elvira narrowed her eyes. "That is the transfer deed. The paper I gave this starving woman." "Exactly," Miguel said, slowly unfolding the paper so everyone could see it. "You drafted this with your lawyer 3 days ago. And to make sure you humiliated Maria, to make sure she could not claim any improvement or furniture that might have remained, you included a very specific clause. Do you want me to read it to you?" Elvira stopped grabbing coins. Her hands began to tremble. Miguel adjusted his glasses and read aloud. "By means of this document, Dona Elvira Garcia cedes the totality of Parcel 404, known as the ruins on the hillside, as well as the existing structure." Miguel made a dramatic pause and looked Elvira in the eyes. "And all the content found within the limits of said structure, whether superficial or underground, movable or in seeds. The Garcia family renouncing any future claim on said goods." Silence fell over the hill again. The wind moved the pages of the document. "You wrote it that way," Miguel continued, implacable, "because you thought there was only trash here, rats and old stones. You wanted to make sure Maria kept the trash. But ironically, in doing so, you legally ceded each of these coins to her. According to state law, and this contract signed by your own hand before a notary, the treasure belongs to the owner of the structure." Miguel pointed at Maria. "It belongs 100% to the widow Maria and her son Josue." The color left Elvira's face. She looked like a made-up corpse. "No," she whispered. "That is a technicality. I did not know. It is a mistake." "It is not a mistake," Sheriff Ramirez intervened. "It is the law, ma'am. And I have something else for you. I just witnessed you order a heavy machinery operator to advance over a living person. That is called attempted reckless homicide and endangering a minor." The sheriff took out the handcuffs. "You cannot do this to me," Elvira shrieked, backing away and dropping the coins that returned to the mud. "I am a Garcia. I have money." "Not as much as she does anymore," the sheriff said, pointing at Maria. "Put your hands behind your back, ma'am." The moment was sublime. Elvira was handcuffed, covered in mud and humiliation, while she screamed threats that no longer scared anyone. The excavator driver, pale, testified everything the lady had forced him to do. When the patrol car took Elvira away and the dust settled, Maria stood in front of the mountain of gold. Josu came out of his hiding place and ran toward her. "Mommy, we beat the bad guys." Mara knelt and hugged her son. She cried. But this time they were tears of liberation. A weight of 1,000 tons had been lifted from her. Don Miguel approached and put a hand on her shoulder. "The appraiser will come soon, Maria. But at a glance, there is enough there to buy 10 mansions like the Garcias. You are free, daughter. You are free forever." Mara looked at the collapsed ruins. The wall had fallen, yes, but in falling it had lifted her up. She took a gold coin from the ground and gave it to Josue. "Keep it, my love. Not to spend it. Keep it to remember that God sometimes puts us in ruins, not to bury us, but so we can find the treasure that was hidden." But the treasure was more than gold. It was history. Don Miguel knelt beside the pile and began to examine the coins with the reverence of an archaeologist. "Maria," he said with wonder in his voice, "do you realize what this is? These are not just coins. This is the lost fortune of the Revolutionary Army of the Sierra. Look at the dates. 1788, 1790, 1796. These are Spanish colonial coins, minted in the New World and transported here during the Wars of Independence." He picked up a larger coin, heavier than the others. "This is a gold doubloon, worth a fortune by itself. But more than its monetary value, it is a piece of history. And these rubies," he said, holding one of the red stones up to the sun. "These are blood rubies, mined from the old colonial mines of the South. They were used to barter with foreign merchants who supported the rebellion against the Spanish crown." Mara listened, fascinated. So this was rebel money. "More than that," Miguel said, his eyes shining with excitement. "This was the war chest. The generals who fought for independence needed gold to buy weapons, to pay soldiers, to bribe colonial officials. But in 1798, there was a great betrayal. A loyalist spy infiltrated the rebel ranks and discovered where the treasure was hidden. The Spanish army came to seize it. But the rebels, knowing they were about to be captured, did something brilliant. They walled up the fortune in an old farmhouse on the hillside, disguising it as a simple coral wall. Then they drew the Spanish army away in a false retreat, leading them into an ambush in the valley below. "What happened to the rebels?" Mara asked. "They died," Miguel said solemnly. "All of them. The ambush failed. They were outnumbered. The Spanish forces slaughtered them in the valley. The location of the treasure died with them. For over 2 centuries, treasure hunters have searched these hills. They dug tunnels. They explored caves. They used metal detectors. But they always searched the ground. No one ever thought to look inside the walls." Mara looked at the broken wall with new respect. So these stones were protecting a secret for 200 years. "More than a secret," Miguel said. "A legacy. These rebels were fighting for freedom, for the right to govern themselves, for the end of colonial oppression. This gold was not stolen. It was collected from people who believed in a cause. Farmers donated their savings. Merchants gave their profits. Even the poor gave what little they had, melting down their silver cups and jewelry. This treasure represents the hope of an entire generation that dreamed of independence." Don Miguel stood and looked at the ruins with reverence. "And now, after 2 centuries of darkness, it has come to light. Not in the hands of Elvira, who would have spent it on vanity, but in your hands, Maria, a widow who knows what it means to fight for survival, a mother who knows what it means to sacrifice everything for her child. Maybe that is the real justice here. The treasure has found its true heir." Mara felt tears roll down her cheeks again. But these were different tears. They were not tears of pain or fear. They were tears of understanding. She realized she was not just rich now. She was a guardian of history, a link in a chain that stretched back 200 years to brave men and women who died fighting for something bigger than themselves. "I will not waste it," she whispered, looking at the pile of gold. "I will honor them." "I know you will," Miguel said with a smile. "Now, let us document everything before we move a single coin. We need photographs. We need an official count. We need to catalog each piece." This is not just your fortune, María. It is a national treasure. The government will want to study it. Museums will want to display it. But according to the law, and according to the deed Elvira signed, it belongs to you. You can negotiate. You can sell some pieces to museums and keep the rest. You can donate some to the National Archive and use the rest to build the life you deserve. María nodded, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. Don Miguel pulled out his phone and began taking photographs. The sheriff returned from his car with evidence bags and began the official documentation process. As they worked, María sat on a stone with Josue in her lap, looking at the treasure that had changed everything. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The morning fog lifted, revealing the full beauty of the valley below. From her vantage point on the hillside, María could see the Garcia mansion in the distance. It looked small from here, insignificant. She thought about Elvira, sitting in a jail cell, her perfect makeup running with tears of rage and humiliation. She thought about how greed had blinded the old woman, how hatred had twisted her soul until she could not even see her own grandson as human. "Mama," Josue said, breaking her reverie. "Are we really going to be okay now?" "Yes, my love," María said, kissing the top of his head. "We are going to be more than okay. We are going to be free." The weeks that followed the discovery were a whirlwind of activity that María could never have imagined in her darkest days at the ruins. The story of the widow who found a revolutionary treasure spread like wildfire through the region, then the nation, and finally across the world. News crews came from the capital. Archaeologists arrived with their tools and their excitement. Historians like Don Miguel worked day and night cataloging every coin, every ruby, every fragment of the leather bags that had held the fortune for 2 centuries. María and Josue were moved temporarily to a comfortable hotel in town while experts studied the site. The government offered her a deal that Don Miguel helped negotiate. She could keep 70% of the monetary value of the treasure. The remaining 30% would go to the National Museum, along with the most historically significant pieces. It was more than fair. Even with only 70%, María was wealthier than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. But more importantly, she had become part of history. One afternoon, about a month after the discovery, Don Miguel invited María to his study. The old historian had been working on something special, and he wanted to share it with her. Come in, Miguel said, gesturing her to a chair surrounded by books and maps. "I want to show you something that will make you understand just how important your discovery is." He spread a large map of the Americas across his desk. It showed North and South America, with red marks scattered across various locations. "María," he began, "your treasure is not unique. What I mean is, it is not the only Revolutionary War chest that was hidden and lost during the independence struggles. All across the former Spanish colonies, similar stories exist. Let me show you." Don Miguel pointed to a location in Venezuela. In 1812, near Caracas, Simón Bolívar and his revolutionary army were retreating from a Spanish counterattack. They had accumulated a significant war chest through donations and seized Spanish assets. Rather than let it fall into enemy hands, they hid it in a network of caves in the coastal mountains. To this day, treasure hunters search those caves. Some pieces have been found over the years, but the main cache remains hidden. He moved his finger to another mark in Argentina. In 1817, General José de San Martin was preparing to cross the Andes to liberate Chile. He needed gold to pay his army of the Andes. The people of Mendoza donated everything they had. Wealthy families melted down their silverware. Churches gave their sacred vessels. But San Martin knew the mountain crossing was dangerous. He could not risk losing the entire fortune in an avalanche or ambush, so he divided it. Part went with the army. Part was hidden in estancias along the route. One such cache was hidden in the walls of an old ranch, very similar to your ruins. It was discovered in 1963 when the ranch was being demolished. Over 200 kilograms of silver coins and gold ingots were found sealed in the adobe walls. Maria leaned forward, fascinated. So other people hid treasures in walls too. Exactly, Miguel said with excitement. It was a common practice. Walls were perfect hiding places. They were strong. They could be disguised. And if you were killed before you could retrieve the treasure, the secret died with you. He pointed to a mark in Mexico. In 1810, when Father Hidalgo launched the Mexican independence movement, his forces seized the silver from Spanish mines. But they knew they could not hold the cities for long. They hid portions of the treasure in churches, in haciendas, in the walls of colonial buildings. One cache was found in 1998 in Guanajuato, sealed behind a false wall in a convent. Another was discovered just 5 years ago during an earthquake that cracked open the wall of an old mansion. The pattern is clear, Miguel continued. Revolutionary forces across Latin America faced the same problem. They needed money for war, but they could not keep it safe on the battlefield. So they hid it, intending to retrieve it after victory. But many of them died. The hiding places were forgotten. The treasures became legends. He looked at Maria with intensity. Your treasure is part of a continental story of sacrifice and hope. These were not pirates burying stolen loot. These were patriots protecting the resources of a revolution. They were fighting against the most powerful empire in the world at that time. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. She had not fully grasped the weight of what she had found. Don Miguel turned to another map, this one showing just their region. Let me tell you about the specific history of your treasure, he said. In 1795, the Spanish colonial government was struggling to maintain control. Revolutionary ideas from the French and American revolutions were spreading. Secret societies formed in every major city. Here in our region, a group of intellectuals, merchants, and military officers created what they called the Society of Free Sons. They met in secret. They planned rebellion. Miguel pulled out a faded document from a protective sleeve. This is a letter from 1796, written by one of the society members. I found it in the National Archive last week. Listen to this. He read aloud in a solemn voice. We have collected from the faithful patriots a sum of 40,000 gold pesos and precious stones of equal value. This fortune represents the sacrifice of 300 families who have given all they possess for the cause of liberty. We cannot risk its discovery by the loyalist spies who infest our ranks. Don Rafael has offered his estancia on the hillside as a hiding place. The site is remote and appears worthless. We will seal the treasure in the walls of his barn, disguised as simple repairs. Only 5 of us know the location. May God protect this wealth until the day of our freedom. Maria felt tears in her eyes. Don Rafael, that must have been the original owner of the ruins. Yes, Miguel confirmed. Don Rafael Garcia, actually, an ancestor of your late husband Antonio. The Gaja family was not always corrupt and cruel. Rafael was a hero. He risked everything for independence. According to military records, he and the other 4 society members were betrayed by a Spanish spy in 1798. They were arrested, tried for treason, and executed by firing squad in the valley below your hillside. They died without revealing the location of the treasure. The Spanish tore apart Rafael's estancia looking for it. They dug up the grounds. They searched every building. But they never thought to break open the walls. Eventually, they gave up and burned the main house. Only the old barn walls remained, the ruins you now own. So the treasure waited there for over 200 years, Maria whispered, waiting for someone to find it. Not just someone, Miguel said gently. You. Maybe it was meant to be you. A woman who knew suffering, a mother who understood sacrifice. Someone who would not squander it on greed, but would honor the memory of those who died protecting it. Maria was quiet for a moment, absorbing the weight of history. Then she asked, were there other hiding places? Did the society have more treasures? Miguel nodded. According to the letter, yes. The 40,000 pesos in your walls was only one of 3 catches. The other 2 were hidden in different locations as insurance. If one was discovered, the revolution could continue with the others. But after the execution of the 5 leaders, the information was lost. No one else knew where the other 2 catches were hidden. They may still be out there, waiting to be found. Or they may have been discovered long ago and spent without anyone knowing their origin. He pointed to 2 other locations on the local map. Historians believe one cache was hidden somewhere in the old mission church of San Sebastian, about 50 kilometers from here. The church was destroyed in an earthquake in 1860. If treasure was hidden there, it is likely buried under tons of rubble. The 3rd cache was supposedly hidden on a coastal hacienda that was later swallowed by the sea due to erosion. Divers have searched the underwater ruins, but the ocean keeps its secrets well. María looked at the map with wonder. So my treasure might be the only one of the 3 that survived intact. It appears so, Miguel confirmed. Which makes it even more precious. Not just in monetary terms, but in historical value. This is the last surviving evidence of the Society of Free Sons. Without your discovery, they would have been a footnote in history, a minor mention in dusty archives. Now, because of you, their story will be told. Their sacrifice will be remembered. Museums will display the coins. School children will learn about Don Rafael and his companions. They will finally receive the honor they deserve. María felt the responsibility settle on her shoulders like a mantle. I want to do something meaningful with this, she said. I want to honor them properly. You already have, Miguel said with a smile. You survived. You protected your son. You refused to be broken by cruelty and injustice. In a way, you are carrying on their fight. They fought for freedom from tyranny. You fought for freedom from Elvira's tyranny. They succeeded in hiding their treasure so the Spanish could not use it for oppression. You succeeded in claiming it so Elvira could not use it for vanity. The parallel is beautiful. Over the following months, as the treasure was officially catalogued and valued, María learned more details that connected her discovery to a larger pattern of revolutionary sacrifice across the continent. An expert from the National Museum came to give a presentation to the local historical society, and María attended. The expert, Dr. Patricia Vega, was a specialist in Revolutionary-era artifacts. She had studied similar discoveries across Latin America for over 20 years. Mrs. María de Tar. Vega said warmly after her presentation, I want you to know that your discovery is the most complete revolutionary war chest ever found in our country. Most other finds have been partial, a few coins here, some silver pieces there, but yours is intact. All the leather bags, all the coins, the rubies, even some documents that were sealed with the treasure. It is unprecedented. Documents? María asked with surprise. I did not know there were documents. Dr. Vega nodded enthusiastically. Yes. When we carefully excavated the remaining wall sections, we found several sealed glass bottles. Inside were papers preserved remarkably well by the glass and the dry conditions inside the wall. One is a list of donors, 327 names, families who gave gold, merchants who donated profits, even servants who contributed their small savings. Each name is written in careful script. It is a monument to collective sacrifice. Can you read some of the names? María asked, deeply moved. Dr. Vega pulled out a photograph of the document. Here is one entry. Juan Morales, blacksmith, donated 3 silver pieces, all he owned, so his children might live in a free nation. Another. Catalina Robles, seamstress, gave 2 gold coins, her life savings, for the cause of justice. And another. Father Domingo Ortiz, priest, melted the silver candlesticks of his church and gave the metal for liberty. Tears streamed down María's face as she listened. These were not rich people, she whispered. These were people like me, poor people who gave everything. Exactly, Dr. Vega said. That is what makes this so powerful. The Spanish Empire fell not because of armies alone, but because ordinary people made extraordinary sacrifices. Your treasure is physical proof of that truth. And now it will be preserved forever. Some pieces will go to museums in the capital. Some will travel internationally to exhibitions about the age of revolutions. Schoolchildren will see them and learn that freedom has a price. And that price was paid by people whose names we now know thanks to you. Maria realized in that moment that she was not just wealthy. She was a guardian of memory, a bridge between the past and the future. The treasure had found her for a reason. It had waited 200 years not for someone rich and powerful, but for someone who understood struggle. Someone who knew what it meant to fight against overwhelming odds. Someone who would treat these artifacts not as mere wealth, but as sacred relics of courage. As the months passed and the legal processes concluded, Maria made her decisions about what to do with her fortune. She kept some of the treasure for herself and Josua, enough to secure their future for generations. She donated a significant portion to the National Museum, where a special wing would be created to tell the story of the Society of Free Sons and the Revolutionary War chests of Latin America. She funded a scholarship program for poor children in the region, named after Don Rafael Garcia and the other executed revolutionaries. She renovated the old mission church of San Sebastian, hoping that perhaps one day the second cache might be found there. But most importantly, she decided to preserve the ruins on the hillside. Not to tear them down and build a mansion, but to protect them as a historical monument. She hired architects to stabilize the remaining walls. She created a small museum on the site where visitors could learn the story of what happened there. The wall where the treasure was hidden was partially reconstructed with glass panels, so people could see inside and understand how the fortune had been concealed. A bronze plaque was installed with the names of the 327 donors who had made the treasure possible. The inauguration of the monument was attended by hundreds of people. Government officials came, historians and archaeologists, common people from the town who had heard the story and were moved by it. Don Miguel gave a speech, his voice strong despite his age. "This place," he said, sweeping his arm toward the preserved ruins, "is a testament to the fact that history is not just made by kings and generals. It is made by ordinary people who dare to dream of a better world. It is made by blacksmiths and seamstresses, by priests and widows, by anyone who refuses to accept injustice as inevitable." Maria stood beside him, holding Josua's hand. She looked at the crowd and felt a profound sense of peace. She had gone from being thrown away like garbage to being honored as a guardian of history. But she knew the real heroes were not her. They were the people whose names were on that list. The people who gave everything 2 centuries ago. The people who died so that future generations, including her son, could live in freedom. As the sun set over the valley that day, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that matched the color of the treasure that had changed everything, Maria made a silent promise to those long-dead revolutionaries. "Your sacrifice was not in vain. Your names will be remembered. Your treasure was protected until it could do good in the world. Rest in peace, brave souls. Your fight is honored. Your memory is preserved. And because of you, a widow and her son are free." 1 year had passed since that storm changed everything. 1 year since the wall fell and revealed its secret. 1 year since Maria transformed from a despised widow into a woman of substance and purpose. The changes in her life were profound, but the most important change was invisible. It was the transformation that happened inside her soul. Maria stood in the garden of her new home. It was not a mansion. She had chosen to build something modest, comfortable, warm. A house of white walls and red tile roof on the same hillside where the ruins stood. She could have built anywhere. She could have purchased a palace in the capital. But she stayed. This land, cursed and worthless in Elvira's eyes, was sacred to Marla. It was where she had touched bottom and found bedrock. It was where she had learned what she was made of. The garden was full of flowers now. roses and jasmine, lavender and honeysuckle. Josu played there every afternoon after school. He attended the best private academy in the region, but Maria made sure he came home every day to these hills. She did not want him to forget where they came from. She did not want him to grow up soft and entitled like the old Garsar family had been. Every evening, she took him to the monument at the ruins and told him the story again. The story of Don Rafael. The story of the 327 families who sacrificed everything. The story of the storm and the wall and the treasure. "Remember, Josa," she would say, kneeling to look him in the eyes. "We are not rich because we are special. We are rich because brave people 200 years ago believed in something bigger than themselves. They died so their children could be free. We owe them our gratitude. We owe them our service. We must never become like the people who threw us away." "I remember, Mama," Jose would answer. He was 8 years old now, taller, stronger, but still gentle and kind. The suffering of those early days had not hardened him. Instead, it had taught him compassion. He knew what hunger felt like. He knew what it meant to be rejected and despised. And because he knew, he was kind to the poor children at his school. He shared his lunch with those who had little. He defended those who were bullied. Maria watched him with pride, knowing that poverty had been a terrible teacher, but an effective one. On this particular afternoon, Maria received a visitor she had not expected. A car came up the newly paved road to her house. It was not a luxury car. It was an old, modest sedan. The driver who got out was a woman in her 60s, thin and tired looking. She wore simple clothes and carried a worn handbag. Maria recognized her after a moment. It was Rosa, one of the servants who had worked in the Garsar mansion. "Rosa," Maria said with genuine warmth. "What brings you here? Please come in." The older woman looked nervous. "Thank you, Mrs. Maria. I am sorry to bother you. I just wanted to see you, to speak with you." They sat in the garden with glasses of cold lemonade. Josu played nearby, building something with wooden blocks. Rosa looked around at the modest beauty of the home, at the happy child, at Maria's peaceful face. She began to cry softly. "I am sorry," Rosa said, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. "I am sorry for what we did to you, or rather, for what we did not do." Maria was confused. "What do you mean?" Rosa took a shaky breath. "When Dona Elvira threw you out after the funeral, all of us servants knew it was wrong. We saw how she treated you. We heard the cruel things she said. But we were afraid to lose our jobs, afraid to stand up to her. So we said nothing. We did nothing. We let her cast you and little Josu out into the cold. I have not slept well since. My conscience torments me. I had to come and ask your forgiveness." Maria reached across and took the older woman's hand. "Rosa, there is nothing to forgive. You were in a difficult position. Elvira controlled your livelihood, I understand. But you do not understand," Rosa insisted. "After you left, after you found the treasure, Dona Elvira became unbearable. She was arrested for trying to hurt you. She paid bail and came back to the mansion. But she was a broken woman. She screamed at us constantly. She accused us of stealing. She said everyone had betrayed her. One by one, we all quit. No one could stand working for her anymore. Now she lives alone in that big house. No servants, no family, no friend. Just her bitterness and her regrets. And you?" Maria asked gently. "Where are you working now?" Rosa looked down at her worn hands. "Nowhere steady. I clean houses when I can find work. It is hard at my age. But I would rather scrub floors in peace than serve in that house of misery." Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she made a decision. "Rosa, how would you feel about working for me? I need someone to help manage the house and to help me with a project I am starting. I am opening a school for poor children. I need teachers and staff. Your experience managing the Garcia household would be valuable. The pay will be fair. The work will be respectful. What do you say?" Rosa's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were tears of relief and gratitude. "You would hire me, after what I failed to do for you?" I do not hire people based on their past failures, Maria said with a smile. I hire them based on their character now. You came here to apologize. That takes courage. You left a secure position because you could not stomach injustice anymore. That takes integrity. I would be honored to work with you. Rosa took Maria's hand and kissed it. You are a saint. I am not a saint, Maria laughed. I am just a woman who remembers what it feels like to need a second chance. As word spread that Mario was hiring staff for her new school, others came. Teachers who had been let go from overcrowded public schools. A cook who had been fired from a restaurant for giving leftover food to the homeless. A maintenance man who had a criminal record and could not find work anywhere else. Maria hired them all, not out of charity, but because she saw potential in people that others had discarded. Just as she herself had been discarded, and yet found her purpose. The school opened 6 months later. It was called the Escuela Don Rafael, named after the revolutionary who had first hidden the treasure. It was free for poor children. It provided not just education but meals, clothing, medical care, and hope. Maria visited every week, walking through classrooms, learning children's names, encouraging them to dream big. This is what the treasure was meant for, she thought. Not for one person to live in luxury, but for a community to rise together. But what about Elvira? People often asked Mada about her mother-in-law. Do you hate her? Has she tried to contact you? What happened to her? Maria's answer was always the same. I do not hate her. I pity her. And no, she has not tried to contact me. I think she is too proud to admit she was wrong. The truth was more complicated. Elvira had not disappeared completely from Maria's awareness. Through Don Miguel and others in town, Maria heard reports. Elvira's legal troubles had mounted. The attempted murder charge had been reduced to reckless endangerment due to her lawyer's efforts. But she was convicted and sentenced to house arrest and community service. Her wealth had dwindled as she paid legal fees and fines. The mansion, always expensive to maintain, began to fall into disrepair. Rooms were closed off. The gardens grew wild. Staff left and were not replaced. Elvira became a ghost in her own home, rarely seen except as a shadow passing behind dusty windows. People who had once feared her now pitied her or mocked her. Children dared each other to sneak up to her gates. She had become the town's cautionary tale, the rich woman who lost everything because of greed and cruelty. One day, 2 years after the discovery, Maria received a letter. It came by regular mail, not by messenger. The envelope was cheap, the handwriting shaky. Maria opened it with curiosity. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The message was brief. Maria, I am dying. The doctors say I have 6 months, perhaps less. I do not ask for your pity. I do not deserve it. I am writing because I want you to know something before I die. I was wrong. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. The treasure should have been mine by birth, but it became yours by justice. I threw you into ruins, and you found gold. I tried to crush you, and you rose. I have nothing now but regrets. I will die alone, as I deserve. But before I go, I wanted to say what I could never say in person. You won. Not because you found treasure, but because you remained human when I became a monster. I do not ask for forgiveness. I only ask that you tell Josua, when he is old enough to understand, that his grandmother was not always wicked. Once, long ago, I was a girl who believed in love. Then life made me hard. Hardness became cruelty. Cruelty became my prison. You broke free of your prison. I never did. That is the difference between us. Elvira. Mara read the letter 3 times. She felt many things. Anger at the years of mistreatment. Sorrow for a wasted life. Relief that the cruelty had finally been acknowledged. But most of all, she felt a strange compassion. Elvira was right. She had become a prisoner of her own bitterness. That was a worse fate than poverty. Should I visit her? Maria asked Don Miguel when she showed him the letter. The old historian thought carefully before answering. That depends. Do you want to? Or do you feel you should? There is a difference. I do not want to, Maria admitted, But I think perhaps I should. Not for her sake. For mine. I do not want to carry hatred for the rest of my life. If she is dying, maybe this is my chance to let it go completely. Then go, Miguel said. But do not go alone. Take someone with you. Take me if you like. And remember, you do not have to forgive her. You do not owe her anything. But if you can find peace by facing her one last time, then it will be worth it. The next week, María drove to the Garcia mansion. She had not been back since the day Elvira had thrown her out. The gates, once gleaming and polished, were now rusted. The gardens, once manicured to perfection, were overgrown with weeds. The fountain in the courtyard was dry and cracked. The great house looked like a mausoleum. María walked to the front door and knocked. There was no answer. She tried the handle. It was unlocked. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was dark and musty. Furniture was covered with sheets. Paintings hung crooked on the walls. Dust covered everything. María walked through rooms that had once intimidated her with their wealth. Now they just looked sad and empty. She climbed the grand staircase to the second floor and followed the sound of labored breathing to a bedroom at the end of the hall. Elvira lay in a massive four-poster bed that seemed to swallow her shrunken frame. She had lost weight. Her face was pale and drawn. But her eyes, when they opened and saw María standing in the doorway, were still sharp. "You came," Elvira rasped. "I did not think you would." María stepped into the room but did not approach the bed. "I came because I do not want to hate you anymore. Hatred is a burden, and I have carried enough burdens." Elvira nodded weakly. "You are wiser than I ever was." A long silence stretched between them. Then Elvira spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you know what my greatest regret is? It is not the treasure. Wealth does not matter when you are dying. My greatest regret is Josua. I never held him, never told him I loved him. I was so angry that Antonio had married you that I punished an innocent child for existing. I will die without ever knowing my grandson. That is my punishment. And it is worse than anything a judge could have given me." María felt tears prick her eyes despite her resolve to remain detached. "He is a good boy. He is kind and smart. He remembers Antonio. Tell him," Elvira said, struggling to breathe, "tell him that his Abula was not a complete monster. Tell him I am sorry. Tell him I hope he grows up to be nothing like me. I will tell him," María promised. Elvira closed her eyes. "Thank you. Now please go. I do not want you to see me cry. I have at least that much pride left." María turned to leave but paused at the door. "Elvira," she said softly, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free of this." She did not wait for response. She walked out of the room, down the stairs and out of the mansion. She did not look back. 3 weeks later, Dona Elvira Garcia died alone in that big empty house. There was a small funeral. María attended out of respect for Antonio's memory. Few others came. When it was over, María felt a chapter of her life close completely. The woman who had tormented her was gone. The fear and anger were gone too. She was free in a way that money alone could never buy. That evening, she sat with Josua in the garden as the sun set. She told him about his grandmother. Not the cruel woman, but the broken one. She told him about the letter and the deathbed conversation. She told him that people can lose their way, and that hatred destroys the person who carries it more than the person it is aimed at. "So we should never hate anyone, Mama?" Josua asked. "We should try not to," María said. "But we do not have to let them hurt us either. There is a difference between forgiveness and foolishness. I forgave your grandmother, but I did not forget what she did. I learned from it. I became stronger, and now I try to be the kind of person who builds others up instead of tearing them down. I will try to be like that too," Josue said. María hugged her son close. "I know you will, my love. I know you will." The wind passes over the hillside at dawn. It carries dust. Dust that may have once been walls. Dust that may have once been the hands that built those walls. Dust that remembers. Beneath that dust, memory waits. not sleeping, not dead, just waiting for the right moment, the right storm. The right person to break through the surface and ask the question that unlocks everything. What if the land everyone called worthless was never worthless at all? What if worthless was just a word used by people who could not see value in what they did not understand? Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle. Because this is not just a story about a widow and a treasure. This is a story about how we decide what has value, how we decide who has value, and how wrong we can be when we let greed or pride guide those decisions. Mar's story began with loss, the death of a husband, the theft of a home, the cruelty of a family that should have protected her. She was thrown onto land that everyone agreed was cursed, worthless, barren, a pile of old stones that had nothing to offer except hardship and isolation. Even the key she was given was rusted, broken, useless. But keys are funny things. Sometimes the most rusted key opens the most valuable door. Sometimes worthlessness is just a disguise that treasure wears until the right person comes along. Think about the generals who hid that fortune 200 years ago. They knew they were going to die. They knew the Spanish army was coming. They could have spent the gold on one last desperate fight. They could have divided it among themselves and run. They could have buried it in the ground like pirates bury stolen loot. But they did not. They sealed it in walls. They disguised it as nothing. They made it invisible. Because they understood something profound. True wealth is not about possession. It is about preservation. It is about protecting something valuable until it can be used for its true purpose. Those men died. Their names were almost forgotten. The location of their treasure was lost. But the treasure itself survived. It waited, century after century, through earthquakes and storms, through wars and peace, through generations of people walking past those walls without knowing what was hidden inside. It waited for María, not because she was special, but because she was ready, because she had suffered enough to appreciate what she found, because she had been called worthless by people who thought they knew what worth meant. And in that moment, when the wall fell and the gold spilled out, the universe corrected an injustice. Not just the injustice done to María, but the injustice done to Don Rafael and his companions. The injustice done to the 327 families who gave everything for a dream of freedom. All of those debts came due at once. And payment was delivered in a cascade of golden coins that shone like fire in the morning sun. But here is the deeper truth. The treasure was never really about the gold. Yes, the gold changed Marla's life. It gave her security. It gave her the power to say no to people like Elvira. It gave her the resources to build a school and help others. Those are not small things. Those are real and important. But the treasure's true value was what it taught her about herself. In those days at the ruins, when she had nothing, María discovered that she was stronger than she knew. She killed a scorpion to protect her son. She built shelter with her bare hands. She drank from streams and ate bitter berries and refused to give up even when giving up would have been so easy. She stood in front of a machine that could have crushed her and said, "No, this is mine. You will not take it." That is not the action of a worthless person. That is not the action of someone who deserves to be thrown away. That is the action of a human being who knows her own worth regardless of what others say. The gold just made visible what was already true. Now think about Elvira. She had wealth. She had a mansion. She had power and respect and everything that society tells us makes a person valuable. But she was poor, desperately poor, because she had no compassion. She had no love. She had no ability to see value in anything except what could be owned or controlled. She looked at her own grandson and saw a burden. She looked at her daughter-in-law and saw a peasant who did not deserve the Garcia name. She looked at the ruins and saw worthlessness. She was blind, blind to love, blind to humanity, blind to the treasure that was literally in front of her face. And that blindness destroyed her. Not the loss of the treasure, The treasure was just money. What destroyed Elvira was the moment she realized she had thrown away something priceless. The chance to love her grandson. The chance to honor her son's choice. The chance to be remembered as someone who built things instead of someone who tore them down. By the time she understood, it was too late. She died alone in a mansion full of expensive furniture that no one wanted. She died knowing that the woman she had despised was now more respected than she had ever been. She died with regrets so heavy they crushed her more thoroughly than any pile of stones ever could. This is what the story teaches us. Wealth is not about what you own. Wealth is about what you can give. Strength is not about power over others. Strength is about standing firm when everything tries to knock you down. Value is not about what others think of you. Value is about what you know to be true in your own heart. María knew those truths before she found the gold. The gold just gave her the chance to live them out loud. There is another layer to this. Think about the nature of hidden things. We walk past hidden treasures every day without knowing it. Not gold and rubies, but hidden potential, hidden kindness, hidden strength in people we have dismissed as worthless. How many servants did Elvira employ and never bother to learn their names? How many people did she pass on the street without seeing them as human? How many opportunities for connection and love did she miss because she was so focused on maintaining her position and her pride? María could have become like that. She had every reason to become bitter and cruel. She was betrayed. She was humiliated. She was thrown away by the people who should have loved her. If anyone had the right to become hard and hateful, it was her. But she did not. Why? Because she remembered where she came from. She remembered what it felt like to be hungry, to be cold, to be afraid. And when she found wealth, she did not use it to build walls between herself and others. She used it to build bridges, schools, scholarships, monuments to honor the forgotten. She saw the hidden treasure in other people. In Rosa the servant who came to apologize. In the teachers who had been fired. In the cook who fed the homeless. In the maintenance man with a criminal record. She saw past the surface to the value underneath. And in doing so, she multiplied her treasure 1,000-fold. Because here is the secret. Gold can be spent, money can be lost, but the impact of seeing worth in others, of giving people a second chance, of building something that outlasts you, that treasure grows over time. It does not diminish, it multiplies. The school María built will educate hundreds of children. Those children will grow up and have children of their own. They will tell the story of the widow who found gold and chose to share it instead of hoarding it. They will pass down the lesson that worthless is just a word used by people who have stopped looking for value. And in that way, Don Rafael's treasure will continue to change lives long after the last coin has been spent or donated to a museum. This is the alchemy of generosity. This is how gold becomes something more than gold. This is how a pile of old coins becomes a legacy. Now let us talk about the walls themselves. Because walls are everywhere in our lives. We build them to protect ourselves. We build them to hide things we do not want others to see. We build them to keep people out or to keep ourselves in. Elvira built walls around her heart. Tall, thick walls that no one could penetrate. She thought those walls protected her. She thought they made her strong. But really they made her a prisoner. She died inside those walls, alone and bitter, never having let anyone truly in. Maria's walls were different. They were ruins. They were broken and open to the sky. She had no protection. She was vulnerable, exposed. Anyone could see her suffering. Anyone could witness her poverty. And yet, those broken walls saved her life. Because the wall that hid the treasure could only reveal its secret when it fell. If it had remained intact and strong, the gold would have stayed hidden forever. It was the weakness of the wall, the crack that Elvira's kick widened, the storm that washed away the plaster, that allowed the treasure to be found. Sometimes our walls need to fall. Sometimes the things that we think protect us are actually the things that keep us from our destiny. Sometimes we need to be broken open before we can discover what we truly are. María was broken open by grief and injustice. And in that breaking, she found gold. Not just the literal gold in the wall, but the gold of her own resilience. The gold of her own capacity for love and forgiveness. The gold of her own worth that had been there all along, buried under layers of doubt and fear and the voices of people who told her she was nothing. The wall fell, and the truth emerged, shining, undeniable, beautiful. This is what ruins teach us. This is why María chose to preserve the ruins instead of tearing them down to build something new. Because ruins are proof that things can fall apart and still have value. Ruins are proof that what looks broken can still be beautiful. Ruins are proof that endings can also be beginnings if we are willing to see them that way. Stand in a ruin and you are standing in a place where time is visible. You can see the layers. You can see what was built and what fell. You can see how nature reclaims what humans abandon. You can see how new life grows in the cracks of old walls. A ruin is not dead. It is transformed. It is becoming something else. Something that serves a different purpose than it did when it was whole. María was a ruin when she arrived at those walls. Her life had fallen apart. Her husband was dead. Her home was taken. Her security was gone. She was broken stone and crumbling adobe. She was open to the elements. She was what people throw away. But she was not dead. She was transforming. And the ruins where she took shelter were also transforming. Together, woman and stone, they became something new. A place of discovery. A place of justice. A place where the past reached out to save the present. That is the magic of ruins. They are not failures. They are transitions. They are proof that nothing is ever truly finished. That there is always another chapter waiting to be written if we have the courage to pick up the pen. Let us talk now about storms. Because the storm that collapsed the wall and revealed the treasure was not the enemy. It felt like the enemy to María as she huddled in the cold with her son, watching her pathetic shelter fall apart. It felt like the final cruelty in a long line of cruelties. It felt like proof that even the universe had turned against her. But the storm was not punishment, it was preparation. It was the force necessary to break through layers of hardened mud and reveal what was underneath. Without the storm, the treasure stays hidden. Without the storm, María lives in poverty on top of wealth she never discovers. Without the storm, there is no story. We all face storms. We all have moments when everything we have built falls apart. When the roof we trusted fails and the cold rain pours in. When the ground we stand on turns to mud. When we feel like we cannot hold on for one more second. Those are the moments that matter most, not because the storm is good, but because the storm reveals what the calm concealed. It washes away the false. It exposes the true. It shows us what we are really made of. María could have left. After the storm, after the wall fell, after she saw the crack in the stones. She could have taken Josua and walked down the hill and begged for shelter in town. She could have given up. But something told her to stay. Some instinct. Some whisper from the universe, or from Antonio's spirit, or from her own deep knowing that this place, this terrible place, held something she needed, and she was right. The treasure was not a reward for suffering. Life does not work that way. Good people suffer every day without finding gold. But the suffering prepared her to recognize the value of what she found. The suffering taught her that wealth is not just money. It taught her that security is not just a roof over your head. It taught her that strength is not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going despite fear. Those lessons are treasures too. Invisible treasures that no one can steal or tax or take away. The kind of treasures that make a person rich in ways that matter more than bank accounts. And when the visible treasure arrived, María was ready. She did not waste it on revenge or luxury or proving anything to anyone. She used it to honor the past and build a future. She used it to transform suffering into purpose. That is wisdom. That is what it means to truly find treasure. Not just to possess wealth, but to know what it is for. Think about time for a moment. 200 years passed between the moment that gold was sealed in the wall and the moment it spilled out onto the ground. 2 centuries, 8 generations, entire lifetimes lived and lost while the treasure waited in darkness. Don Rafael and his companions were executed in 1798. They died believing their cause might be lost. They died without seeing independence. They died not knowing if their sacrifice meant anything at all. But it did. It meant everything. Because their treasure survived to fund a school in the 21st century. Because their story survived to inspire a widow who thought she had nothing. Because their names, written on a list sealed in a bottle, were recovered and honored and spoken aloud after 200 years of silence. They are not forgotten. They are not lost. They are part of a story that continues. A story that includes Maria and Josie. A story that includes the children who will attend the Escuela Don Rafael and learn to read and dream and become more than their circumstances. A story that includes you, listening to these words right now, wherever you are, whatever time it is in your part of the world. The story continues. The treasure multiplies. The sacrifice is honored. Time is not a line, it is a spiral. The past and present and future are all connected by threads we cannot always see, but can sometimes feel when we stand in the right place at the right moment and let ourselves be open to the mystery. Maria stood in that place. That crossroads where past met present, where injustice met justice, where loss met discovery, where death met new life. And because she stood there with courage and refused to be moved, the treasure found her. Not the other way around. The treasure found her. That is important. We do not find treasure by searching frantically. We find it by being present, by standing firm, by refusing to believe the voices that tell us we are worthless, by surviving the storm, by staying in the ruins even when every rational voice says to leave. Treasure comes to those who are ready to receive it, and readiness is not about being perfect or deserving or lucky. Readiness is about being broken open enough that light can get in, being empty enough that there is room for something new, being humble enough to recognize value when it appears in unexpected forms. Maria was ready. She did not know she was ready. She thought she was just surviving. But survival is its own form of readiness. Survival means you are still here, still standing, still breathing, still capable of receiving the gift when it arrives. And it will arrive, maybe not as gold, maybe not as anything you expect. But if you stand firm through the storm, if you refuse to accept worthlessness as your identity, if you keep protecting what matters even when everything seems lost, the treasure will find you. It found Maria. It found Don Rafael 200 years before. It has found countless others whose stories are not written in books, but are written in the lives they touched, and the children they raised, and the quiet acts of courage they performed when no one was watching. You are part of that story too. Your ruins matter. Your storms matter. Your refusal to give up matters. Even if you never find gold, even if your treasure comes in the form of a child's smile, or a sunset after rain, or a stranger's kindness when you needed it most. All of it matters. All of it is part of the great story of humans, refusing to be crushed by circumstances, refusing to believe that worthless means anything except that someone failed to look closely enough. The wind passes over the hillside again. It is evening now. The sun is setting. The golden light that first revealed the treasure is fading, but the monument stands. The walls are preserved. The names are carved in bronze. The story is told, and somewhere, a child who has never heard of Maria or Don Rafael or the Society of Free Sons is learning to read in a classroom funded by that ancient gold. That child does not know the story yet, but one day they will, and they will carry it forward, and the treasure will continue to grow, because that is what treasure does when it is used well. It does not diminish, It multiplies. It flows from hand to hand, from heart to heart, from generation to generation, until the original source is forgotten but the impact remains. A tree grows from a seed. Eventually the seed is gone, decomposed, invisible. But the tree stands. The tree gives shade. The tree gives fruit. The tree gives oxygen. The tree is the seed's treasure, multiplied beyond recognition. Marla is a tree now. She grew from a seed of suffering, but she is not suffering anymore. She is shade for those who need shelter. She is fruit for those who hunger. She is oxygen for those who struggle to breathe. She is proof that worthless is a lie, and that treasure is everywhere if we have eyes to see it. The ruins on the hillside stand in twilight. The tourists have gone home. The museum is closed. The children are in their beds. The wind whispers through the preserved walls, carrying the scent of jasmine from Maria's garden. It is quiet, peaceful, sacred. This is what remains when the noise fades. This is what lasts when everything else falls away. The story, the lesson, the hope that suffering is not the end. That walls can fall and reveal wonders. That worthless is just a word used by people who have forgotten how to see. If you are in ruins right now, if you feel like the storm has destroyed everything, if people have thrown you away and called you worthless, remember Marla. Remember that she stood in the exact same place, broken, desperate, alone, and underneath her feet, invisible, was everything she needed. It is there for you too. Maybe not gold, but something. Strength you did not know you had, kindness from unexpected places, a crack in the wall that lets in light, a storm that washes away the false and reveals the true. Stand firm. Guard what matters. Refuse to accept the verdict of those who cannot see your value. The treasure will find you. Not because you are special, but because you are still here, still standing, still refusing to give up. And that, more than all the gold in all the walls in all the world, is the real treasure, the worth that no one can take away, the value that no one can deny, the truth that you knew all along, even when everyone told you otherwise. You are not worthless. You never were. You are standing on treasure. It is just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And when it does, when your wall falls and your gold spills out into the light, remember this story. Remember Mana. Remember Don Rafal. Remember that you are part of a long line of people who survived impossible things and discovered that the ruins were hiding something beautiful all along. The wind passes one more time, carrying stories, carrying hope, carrying the scent of flowers that grow in places where people said nothing would ever grow. And memory, patient as stone, waits, always waits, until someone is ready to hear, until someone is ready to dig, until someone is ready to believe that worthless is a lie and that treasure is real and that the story is not over yet. Not by a long way. Not as long as there are people willing to stand in ruins and refuse to leave. Not as long as there are walls waiting to fall. Not as long as there are storms that wash away the false. Not as long as there is gold buried in the darkness, waiting for the light. And so we return to where we began, to the present moment, to wherever you are right now, listening to this story unfold in the darkness. Perhaps you are lying in bed, the covers pulled up, the world outside your window quiet and still. Perhaps you are driving through the night, headlights cutting through darkness, mile after mile stretching ahead. Perhaps you are sitting in a room where sleep will not come, where thoughts circle like birds that cannot find a place to land. Perhaps you are somewhere I cannot imagine, in a time zone I have never visited, living a life I will never know. But we are connected now. You and I, through this story, through Maria's journey from despair to discovery, through walls that fell and secrets that were revealed, through the simple truth that worthless is always a lie told by people who have stopped looking for value. If this journey through time and stone and human resilience has touched something in you, if Maria's refusal to give up has sparked something in your own heart, if you believe that ruins can hold treasures and that storms can reveal what calm conceals, then I ask you to do something small but meaningful. Like this video. It is a simple gesture, a click, a tap, but it tells me that this story mattered to you. That Maria's struggle was not forgotten the moment these words ended. That somewhere in the world, someone heard about a widow and a wall and a treasure, and they thought, yes, I understand. Yes, I have felt like that. Yes, I needed to hear this tonight. Your like is not just a number. It is a signal fire in the darkness. It tells other people searching for hope that they should stop here, that this story might be what they need. That Maria's gold still shines after 200 years, and its light can reach them too. And if you want to explore more mysteries that sleep between history and justice, more stories of forgotten people who refuse to stay forgotten, more tales of treasures hidden and revealed and transformed into something greater than gold, then subscribe. Subscribe to keep these stories alive, to keep them traveling through time, just like those ancient coins traveled through centuries sealed in a wall, waiting for the right moment. Your subscription helps preserve the memory of people like Don Rafael, who died believing their sacrifice meant nothing, not knowing it would echo through generations. Your subscription helps honor the 327 families whose names were written on a list and buried in darkness, not knowing those names would be read aloud again in the light. This is how stories survive, not in stone or metal, though those help, but in the choice of people like you to say, yes, this matters. Yes, I want to remember. Yes, I want to pass this forward. If you join our community, you become part of something larger than entertainment. You become a guardian of memory, a keeper of stories that others tried to bury, a voice that says the forgotten deserve to be found. Take a moment. The buttons are right there. A small action with a large meaning, a way to say that Maria's story, and all the stories like it, deserve to continue. I will wait. There. Thank you. Whether you clicked or not, whether you subscribed or simply listened, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about a widow you never met, and a treasure you will never touch, and a wall that fell in a place you may never visit. Your presence here matters. Your attention is a gift. In a world that constantly demands you look away, move faster, forget quicker, you chose to slow down and remember. That is its own form of treasure. Before I let you go, before I release you back into your night or your day, or whatever time holds you now, I want to leave you with one last thought. Somewhere tonight, someone is standing in their own ruins. Their wall has not fallen yet. Their treasure has not been revealed. They are cold and afraid, and people have told them they are worthless. They do not know that underneath their feet, invisible and patient, is everything they need. Maybe that person is you. If it is, I want you to hear this clearly. You are Maria at the beginning of her story, not at the end. The storm has not come yet. The wall has not fallen yet. The treasure has not spilled out yet. But it will. Not because you are special or chosen or lucky, but because you are still standing. Because you refused to leave your ruins. Because you chose to stay even when staying was the hardest thing you had ever done. That choice matters. That choice is already building your treasure, even if you cannot see it yet. Every moment you survive. Every time you protect what matters. Every time you refuse to believe the verdict of those who cannot see your worth. You are stacking coins in your own hidden wall. You are sealing rubies in your own secret chamber. And one day, when the storm you fear finally comes, it will not destroy you. It will reveal you. And everyone who called your land worthless will have to watch as gold pours from stones they said held nothing. And you will understand, finally, that you were never poor, you were just hidden, waiting for the right moment, gathering strength in the darkness. So stand firm. The storm is coming, but so is the treasure. Until the next mystery calls us back into the past, until the next forgotten story demands to be remembered. Until the next wall falls and reveals what was always there, may your present be peaceful. May your ruins hold wonders you have not yet discovered. May your storms wash away only what needs to go. May you sleep well tonight, knowing that worthless is a lie and that you are standing on treasure even if you cannot feel it yet. The wind passes over the hillside one last time. The monument to Don Rafael stands in starlight. The names of the 327 remain carved in bronze. María sleeps in her modest house, her son safe in the next room, her conscience clear, her heart at peace. And memory, patient as stone, keeps its vigil, waiting for the next person who needs to hear that ruins are not endings. They are just walls that have not fallen yet. Good night, or good morning, or good afternoon. Wherever you are, whatever your time, may you find your treasure. May your wall fall when you are ready. May you remember this story when you need it most. The ruins on the hillside are quiet now, but the story continues. It always continues. As long as someone is listening, as long as someone remembers, as long as someone believes that underneath the worthless land, gold is waiting. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. The treasure was always yours. You just had to wait for the wall to fall. Sleep well. Dream of gold and storms and walls that break open to reveal wonders. And when you wake, remember, you are not worthless. You never were. Good night.